And we're live. Yes, it worked. Okay, cool. So we are live. It is episode 13, Kris Painschab of Badlands Herpetoculture. I made the Facebook post and said that I had heard you nerd out on Coleonyx a couple of different times. And that was how I knew I had to talk to you, because I'm a huge proponent of animals in the United States that I think can kind of fill in for animals that are commonplace in the pet trade. Like, I understand the heating requirements, but it makes me super mad that nobody cares about desert iguanas and everybody loves bearded dragons or chuckwallas or things like that. And then I heard you talk about Coleonyx a handful of times, and I was like, yes, another dude that like wants to throw leopard geckos back into Iran and get our own geckos. Like, yeah. And then, of course, obviously your social media feed has a ton of other stuff that you also work with. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure when I made the post that I pointed that out, because this podcast is kind of brings in a range of people, like new and experienced. But I wanted nerds that were interested in the same nerdy stuff to be able to talk to each other or hear one of their own speak on a subject. So like, as I'm going through talking to people, I'm like, oh yeah, man, gecko nerds need to talk to this person. Or, in your case, when I was talking about Coleonyx, like, I just wanted to make sure that if there were other nerds floating out there in social media who didn't talk about their weird little geckos with their other reptile friends, that they knew they could come talk about weird little geckos here. So yeah, man, just kind of take folks through the collection and tell us what you're working with, and then we'll dig into the nerdery.
Well, yeah. So my collection is to some extent a Noah's Ark kind of a thing. I work with a lot of different species of geckos, ranging from obviously some of the more common New Caledonia stuff, gargoyles and leeches. I've jumped over to a couple Australian species, some Phyluris, and a lot of the gamut of interesting eublepharid. As far as geckos go, Coleonyx, Goniosaurus, and then now dipping into some of the, not going to say their scientific genus name, the cat geckos, which is one of the more exciting projects. That it actually turns out a big shipment of Borneo, which used to be dorsalis and now is felinus. I may be saying that wrong. Have come in this year in particular, especially in kind of the December, January, February. So a lot of people that have kind of stuck their fingers into importers know that some of the cat geckos have been coming in. So I picked up a little group of them and have been really enjoying those. And then I kind of go into a lot of North American colubrids. In fact, a lot of the little guys you see right here are some grow out tubs, in fact, for some really interesting embryi subspecies, which actually just got back to reclassifying as embryi subspecies. Those are Melomorums, the thorn scrub. And man, rat snakes, Pitiophis, a couple of Asian rat snakes snuck their way in here. I don't know how they got here, but yeah, kind of stuff like that. A big gamut, enough to keep me busy, definitely. But nothing that is gonna maybe be too standoutish as something that's real funky in the hobby, but definitely some little niche corners that I like to itch.
I think that's funny that you even said that. Nothing that's going to be too stand out as funky in the hobby. You just listed like 4 things that most people don't even know exist. I literally, so I had a lunch break for my class today and was telling my wife, and I was like, no, this is the guy we were talking about the cool geckos. And she's like, yeah. And I said, and this is the dude when I was listening to, it must have been Snakes and Stogies because it was probably a live stream. And I was like yelling at my computer about emeries when you were talking.
Oh, man.
They're an endangered species in Illinois. So to hear guys talk about it that are from different parts of the country that have that, because in Illinois, they don't recognize subspecies. Okay. So I know the guy who works for DNR who wrote the law, and his explanation was that when he wrote our herp code, he needed to get folks who don't know anything about reptiles to vote for it and make it a law. And so it's very simply worded. It's cool. Like I'm totally in for their requirements, insurance, and all kinds of stuff they do is really cool. But they don't recognize subspecies, and then we get weird stuff, like emeries, and then we get coach whips and goofy things that are in like one county from the late 1800s, and then and then you're like, oh well, I want to get a Sonoran coach whip, and the dude's like, no, man, we don't specify. Like, I don't care if it's pink and from Utah, it might have been in Illinois at once. It's like, come on, dude. Like,
so
but then
your Pituophis complex could get kind of funky up there, where you have Sei, but it's a subspecies of Cantenifer.
Right.
But they don't recognize it like that. They recognize it as just Pituophis Cantenifer.
Right. They don't recognize subspecies at all.
Wow.
And, which is funny, because one of the endangered species in Illinois, and none of this is anything to do with lizards, and I don't care. One of the endangered species in Illinois is the Illinois mud turtle, which is a subspecies of the yellow mud turtle. And so I called this IDNR, and I was like, okay, well, you can't get Illinois mud turtles. They did a study that genetically broke them apart as a subspecies to even understand that it was a subspecies. And then we're like, oh, well, in our state, we don't have yellow mud turtles. We have this subspecies, further reinforcing the fact that they are endangered here, and it's a problem because of our water systems in Illinois are crap. But so I was like, yeah, cool, no problem. So I do educational shows, and I was like, hey man, could I get a couple of yellow mud turtles, and then I could teach the lesson and explain, hey, these aren't Illinois mud turtles, these are yellow. Illinois is a subspecies, and I can explain that and why they've been separated and so on and so forth. The guy was like, oh, that's super cool. We don't recognize subspecies, so they're all endangered. I was like, how can it go the other direction?
Yeah.
Like, dude, that's not. Yeah. So
it's I've been very lucky in my life to get to talk to and gotten to listen to through many podcasts some amazing scientists that are able to explain taxonomy much more specifically than I can. But yeah, I kind of nerd out in two directions. My brain is like a little spider web when it goes to like specific locality animals. So like I work with like 3 localities of thorn scrub rats, which are Emryi melomorum. And I'm so happy to sit here on live television talking to millions of people and say Emryi melomorum, because they were just reclassified as an actual subspecies. They're no longer as of 2012 when they were thrown away. But yeah, being able to work with all these little guys that just make me so excited. And I work with a line bred group of Nueces County, which is my beautiful county, Emryi, and man, I'm gonna probably start just going off on rants, and I'm sorry. That's
the whole idea. That's why I wanted to talk to you.
When you get into this hobby, and you can stop and say, okay, this isn't for money, this isn't for show, and this is now going to be something that I have love for this, and I want to promote this. I want to promote this little niche. That's when it gets really fun. I've been breeding animals, specifically reptiles, for like 22 years now. Started out with day geckos. I mean, I'm the kid that bred leopard geckos with the blue calcicand with hot rocks.
Yes.
And I mean, I could go back to these old terrible stories of husbandry. You know, it's only a terrible story about husbandry now, because then that was like what you were supposed to do, right?
It was cutting edge.
Yeah, I mean, I bred I was talking to a friend.
Do you know how much money I spent on colored calcicand as a kid?
Oh god, that electric blue color was just the best, wasn't it? It was the best.
I mean, I probably wasted enough birthdays before I was 16 to get the car I got when I was 16 in calcicand. Like, yeah, you were supposed to do that.
If it didn't look like a blacklight poster had thrown up on your reptile collection, you were doing it completely wrong. Yeah. And it's, I'm kind of mutating into maybe the newer school of thought. I mean, obviously we see snakes in tubs, and I keep things in tubs. I keep everything with substrates, but I'm starting to move into active, not calling them bioactive, but I call them active substrates in my snake enclosures, which is, springtails. I don't mess too much with isopods, but I've had very good luck with springtails on an active dirt. even in tubs. And now I'm kind of starting to morph into that. Oh, well, maybe we need to start listening to the scientists, which has been a gleaming, theme for the last, maybe year and 3 months. Maybe the scientists need to tell us what works. And UV light is something that I'm starting to kind of look at how I can get that into enclosures like this, which it is possible. It's just going to take us kind of rethinking how we put that light in, and maybe where our vent holes, maybe not in the front, maybe on the side, maybe we have UV strip lights on the side. We're doing some engineering work, and I've even talked with Phil and Justin over at Stake Stow's Herpetoculture Network, and it's showing them some of the designs that I have in mind. I think everybody kind of looks at this new mentality of how we keep animals, or how this progressive thought, right? Like if you don't have a 9-foot by 10-foot enclosure for your ball python, it's just not going to survive. But there is some thought to be had that like this hobby is going to be constantly evolving, and it's only a good thing if it does. That doesn't mean that we throw away everything we've done in the past, because some people have put in some real work and some real time, but that doesn't mean we can't improve on it. So I don't know, kind of ranting from one thing to the other, but yeah.
No, I agree entirely. I just want to point out that I don't know if it's my lack of depth perception because I'm looking at a laptop. You really freaked me out there when you reach back to touch those tubs, because I thought that was a set of like 3-footers by the wall. I didn't realize
there's more.
There's
a whole.
You put your hand back there, and I was like, "Wait a minute, that's not. Yeah, that's wrong." Yeah,
I wish the lighting was a little bit. There's like a whole like 1,000 Warhammer models. Hey, shout out to Games Workshop if y'all want to sponsor me. I paint all your models for my whole life. And
whoa. AOS or 40K?
Oh, well, if you've been doing it long enough, both.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I've been playing since way early fantasy. Here, I'm working on giants right now. This is my painting table. So here's one of the giants.
Oh, that's a whole separate nerdery.
Yeah, these are the Age of Sigmar Guardians.
Yeah.
I got another one I'm working on right here. This is the next one. Yeah, I paint like so I don't sleep a lot. My thought process, if I don't, like, if I sleep less, then I can do more. But if I don't have stuff to do, but then I can't go to sleep because I think that, like, man, I'm kind of sitting here idle and I'm alive and I could be doing other things. So yeah, but
I get it.
working way too many hours, and then trying to maintain a pretty clean and lively collection of animals, and a little girl that's the absolute love of my heart, and a wife that keeps me busy as well, who's also equally amazing. Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyways, we're not going to talk about Warhammer.
Yes. See, man, you can't tell people you have artistic skill like that, and then when they show up and they're like, "Why didn't you paint the back of your tubs to look like the African Savannah?"
Right. There's so much to it. So as a profession, I work in a very strict code centric engineering profession, and so in my hobby, I reflected that for many years. About the first 5 years when I was getting kind of serious into this, which would be about 10 years ago. And I say serious, and I just mean entirely having too many, like having a room dedicated to just animals. And I was collecting weights, and I still do this, and I writing down weights of everything, and weights of eggs, and weights of babies, and the date that it was laid, the date that it hatched. Now some of this information you do want to keep track of, and some of the stuff you do want to know, but like temperature readings, and I was data logging, and I was making spreadsheets, and it was like this beautiful information of my nerdiness meshing with like my endless desire to make everything perfect. And I kind of started getting burnt out at that point. And I was like, okay, I have to take a step back, and got on a truth about 5 years ago when I started getting maybe a little bit more larger of a collection of geckos, when I started doing more what I call them active substrates, not bioactive, because I don't think they're necessarily bioactive. I don't have drainage layers and live plants. and stuff and everything I do have in some, I was able to take a step back and say, okay, how does this do its own thing? And then, one of the species, and we're going to kind of dip into eublephaриds, and I will pontificate my love for eublephaриds a lot. Goniurosaurus hyanensis, I believe that's the right way to say the species name. But the hyaline cave geckos, what an overlooked animal in this hobby that is so easy. I'm pretty sure you can breed these things in a plastic bin with a water bowl and like maybe a mealworm. I don't know. I don't even know. They do the things themselves. They interact with you. The babies squeak, which is the cutest thing in the world. They take well to human interaction, but they also do great with human non-interaction. Ignoring them is great, right? Like, so I started doing active substrates. The first animal I started doing active substrates was with them. And I started letting eggs hatch in the actual enclosure.
Oh, wow.
What a totally different mindset, right? Like, we take our eggs, we put them in these great incubation chambers, and I still do, right? Like, I incubate all kinds of stuff. And starting, and then you wake up one day, and instead of finding eggs, because you've got a 4.5 inch, 5 inch deep substrate layer, and you've got it all, live plants and stuff, you wake up and you have babies, right? And now this isn't going to work for every species. I did it with that species. I ended up doing it with Pachydaktylus tigrinus, which is the
cool
Zimbabwe tiger gecko. Pachydaktylus, the whole Pachydaktylus genus is like a whole nother neat, radical little genus that has tons of geckos in it that people I wish would work more with. The Rugosaurus and some of those other really neat African geckos are real standoutish. We just don't get enough. They don't see enough light, I guess.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I get that.
So the Goniosaurus are pretty community happy. Like, the parents are going to eat the babies. That doesn't mean you need to raise the babies with the parents, though. You can do that with the Pachydaktylus. So yeah, like, kind of morphing into that. So now I wish it's like I want to take my camera around the room and be like, these and these. Gargoyle geckos. I keep them with a thin layer of substrate, but a big nest box, and I remove the egg. There is no question in the world what an adult gargoyle is going to do to a baby gargoyle. I know for a fact what they do, right? And it's what they do in the wild. With Leachianus, when I was working with Seracinorum, kind of the same thing.
I've had it with Cresties for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure Cresties would do the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
But there are a few species you can kind of bend those rules to. And the eublephaриds, for the most part, back in the day, say back in the day like it was 100 years ago, but about 20 years ago, when I had started breeding leopard geckos, I actually got some wild-caught fat tails. Me and my very lucky to have the person that was my mentor in this hobby. That was Carl Vargas of South Texas Geckos, famous for kind of like a million different things. Me and him would kind of work with different species and like swap them back and forth. We worked with some fat tails and bred them. And man, there's a lot of these neat species that you can, I don't know, you could, we did a lot more back then with the caging and substrates and heating, different ways to provide heat to these animals. UV, we did a lot of that back then, that we kind of got into this industrial mentality. And then now now the hobby's getting back into it. But it was like, then we like kind of cranked it up to like 5 or 6, and then we turned it off, right? Like the whole hobby shut it off. Like the ball python mentality, and nothing wrong with ball pythons, amazing species. Never seen one, never held one. But the whole mentality shut off, and then all of a sudden, like the new generation cranked it to 11 and broke the knob off. And they were like, all right. And is that bad? I don't know. The last 10 years we've done that with music, we've done that with cars, we've done that with engineering products, we've done that with phones, we've done that with social media. So where do we kind of go from there?
My thing about that mentality, I guess, is people poo-poo on social media and they don't like it, and they're usually on social media while they're saying that, so that doesn't really make any sense to me. But I do think that kind of the progression that you were describing makes sense in that framework. So like 20 years ago, right? I got a handful of animals, went to the local reptile guy or whatever, got on the king snake forums and, read some books, and I figured out what they were telling me to do. And then I kind of had to figure out how to do it myself. And I could, these are the parameters, and there wasn't a whole lot of infrastructure as far as the industry side of it went to help me achieve those parameters. So that's why, we all went to Home Depot and went on the forums and what brooder lamp do you use to make a sulcata tortoise survive? Like, that kind of stuff. And then I hate that everybody slams on ball pythons, and I do it sometimes too, but it's not ball pythons. I like the animals. It's typically what people get wrapped around the axle about with that is the personalities and the people and the money involved in that side of it. But I also think that explains how it came to be. So the hobby and the industry, the way it is now, couldn't exist without the investment that ball pythons brought in. That's fantastic.
Exactly.
That helped everybody. That's awesome. However, when you talk about like, industrial and racks and clean and we, everything's set up and sterile and so on and so forth, that's fine. You can do that. That's cool. And it does work. If it didn't, a bunch of people wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But the problem is like, as social media became more of a big deal, and YouTube and Facebook and things like that, is the people that were very successful in that started to have influence. And like now we literally call people influencers. Then we didn't. But influencer is kind of an insulting term now, where you're like an idiot or whatever. But at the start of it, those people had genuine influence, that this is what they did, and they were considered very successful in the hobby. Coincidentally, because they were involved in that side of the hobby, they also made a fair amount of money. And so they're the example. And then their influence only grew, because most of the people that we talk about in like older school dudes didn't really get on that train. Even if they kept ball pythons, or even if they kept corn snakes or whatever, it just wasn't their vibe to do that.
No.
So you would have to either personally know those people, or be inside their very small circle, or have some sort of access to it to see how those folks did what they do with colubrids, with weirdo geckos, with whatever. And if you didn't already have some sort of connection, it would be pretty difficult to just go into a pet shop, see some import cave gecko that nobody knows anything about, but then you turn around, there's a wall full of leopard geckos, there's 5 books, 10 other people, and they can all talk to you about it, and they invite you to a Facebook group, and there was just so much more connectivity at the start for those kind of like baseline pet things.
Yeah.
And because the people who were popular and had the influence at that time were the people breeding those things, people emulated them. Like, well, of course it works for them. And it does. Yeah. But then now it actually followed the nature of social media now. Like, now it's cool to make fun of people that use Twitter and Facebook all the time, like they're losers or whatever.
Yeah.
While you're saying that on Twitter and Facebook, because it's just a part of our culture now. We use it. It's just a part of our daily lives. Our Western culture specifically has very much evolved to that, which is okay or not, whatever your opinion is. But our hobby, along with bunches of other hobbies and industries, is just following the path. Where they're like, oh, those ball python idiots, like, 10 years ago it was cool on YouTube, now you're a loser, and this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, no, because you wouldn't know what they were still doing on their YouTube channel if you weren't subscribed from 10 years ago when you thought he was cool. And now it's cool for you to bash him. or
Yeah.
whatever. That's not, but meanwhile, you have new people continually coming in, and at whatever point they got on the train, now there's a whole subset of new people that think all the YouTube ball python people are idiots and I'm never going to keep them in tubs, you terrible human beings.
Yeah.
And I'm only going to build bioactive. And then there's 73 kinds of isopod and all this other, and now you kind of have these competing sections when it's not really generational, but it almost is. It just got sped up because of the access to information and things that social media and internet and technology allows us to have. It used to be stupid kids and their rock music back in my day when we listened to the swing bands or whatever. And it was very obvious generational gaps of 20 years of change. And now it's 5 years ago, everybody had a Freedom Breeder rack and that was okay. And now it's not.
Yeah.
It's dude, that doesn't make any sense at all. There's still people keeping literally thousands of snakes that way successfully. It's okay. You don't have to like it, but people are so militant about every subject, no matter what it is.
There's this people nowadays, because of social media and maybe the quickness, the relatedness, this immediate satisfaction that you can have, whether it's reading a bit of information or it's supplying a bit of information or disinformation. This immediate directness of social media makes us forget that there are people that this hobby would not exist with if they hadn't put in their literal entire lives.
Oh yeah.
The people that the loves breeding corn snakes, right? Like them or love it. There's so many names, the Bob Clarks, the Rob Trembers, the people that put in not hours, not days, not weeks, not months, not years, decades of work to put these things in our hands. And they don't remember that they also put out exactly, they took the exact ingredients on how to bake that cake and put it in your hands and said, hey, here's how I bake this cake. Good luck. And now we take this exact instant information that we get from 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 10, 12, 100 people. And we say, okay, well, you're wrong. And it's well, I'm not saying they did things perfectly, but they had a lot of success. And then also we could probably take that word.
Yeah, usually if it's named after them, it probably worked out okay.
When I first got into this hobby, I got very lucky. The first now I'm not gonna say the first thing I had a red eared slider. Hey, I want to just go ahead and say shout out to Sandy. She passed away during the Texas freeze in February this year. She was 40 years old. That was my parents' red eared slider. She had just hit 40. That's
awesome and sucks at the same time. Sorry.
Yeah, she was 5 years old when I was a year old. Beautiful turtle that was a part of my mom's life for a long time. My mom's whole house is full of turtle trinkets, and hitting 40 for a red ear slider is pretty good. I'm sure they can go much longer than that. I don't know what age she was when my parents got her, but so I've been kind of instilled into the small animal keeping, I would say, my whole life. I got lucky and I started with day geckos. Actually, the animal that really sparked it for me, 1998, 1999, somewhere there. I was 14, 15 years old, and a guy that my dad worked with was a reptile, just all about him. And he would come to work with the albino Burmese around his neck and, all that stuff. And my dad told him that I was into lizards. I love lizards, and I obviously still do. And he got me a wild-caught pair of gold dust day geckos and a book. That was the turning point. He got me a wild-caught pair of day geckos and a book on Phelsuma. It was the book that changed my life. It was the fact that there was information wrote down about this species, how to keep it, how to breed it, that there was building blocks that I could take and morph that into something. And it did. I was successful. I bred gold dust day geckos at about 14, 15 years old. No idea what to do with them when I had babies. Luckily, Carl Vargas was working at the local pet store at the time, and he took the babies off my hands. I don't think he had a ton of success with them either. But back then there weren't like fruit fly cultures, right? Like these babies are the length of their body is like a little maybe over your fingernail.
Yep.
You know, we're talking tiny.
You mean it just show up in the mail in an Amazon box with rice beetles and bean beetles and fruit flies for your varying sizes of micro gecko and dart frog? Weird.
Right. And then like we had a UVB, but there was like I don't even think there were Reptisons. I know that I think I don't remember the brand, but I know a brand sold a huge giant UVB bulb that you could buy.
Yes. I know what you're talking about, and I don't remember.
It had to have been Zoom Ed, right? Was it?
I would think so, because they kind of started the run of, because they were Zoo obviously first, and then kind of brought it to the rest of us cretins here with no money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that I always think that's funny. Like, people bash. Now it's like the in thing to do, like, oh, you went to Petco and got lights or bought an Exoterra or whatever. And it's like, do you understand how cool that is? You know how amazing it is that you can even go to a pet store that has more than a 10 or a 25 or a 75 like that.
Yeah.
You had like that one dude in your neighborhood that had discus or angels and not a car. And then everybody else had 10 gallons with Tetras. And you just had to figure out how to make a frog live in that stupid thing. Like,
it's so weird to tell somebody. It wasn't that PetSmart didn't have a reptile section. It was that there wasn't a PetSmart.
Yeah,
and it's not like I'm in a small city. I'm in Corpus Christi is a pretty big city, 350,000 people. Not massive by any means, but there also wasn't one in San Antonio, Austin. PetSmart didn't exist, or at least not in my well-known. Now, Reptiles Magazine was out, and it was and go back to those old books where they talk about how they did things, how they potted plants, how they knew when to look for eggs on some of these species. I go back to my eyelash geckos book for the Eublephaриds, and I think it was wrote in like '94 or something, and there's so much to chew on in that book. I mean, subspecies have changed, full species have changed. I think even the genus has changed on some of these things. They talk about one of the a few of the subspecies of Goniorosaurus. I think it's the Japanese complex, which will be like the the Orientalis complex. So the Yamenches and all of those. And they talk about how nobody knows, like, how do you keep these things? We don't know yet. Nobody's ever bred them in captivity. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? I just get on my phone. How many you want, baby? They're $400 a piece. I got you. And it's, but go back and look where they have snout to vent links. They have, weights. They tell you all of this calculated information, step by step by step by step by step. This is how we did it. And we need to pay respect to those people. I'm not going to never going to say that they did everything perfect, because there's no such thing as perfection when you're talking about life. Perfection is out there where they've evolved to live. They made perfection, right? We're just trying to emulate what they figured out through evolution. And we're doing it in these little tiny boxes and tubs and glass.
And even then, they could perfectly get eaten by a bird.
That's the other thing. It's the reason they have 12 babies a year is because one of them survives, hopefully. So yeah, it's really the I've never been a player in this hobby, right? Like I never plan to do this full time. I never plan to make money off this. I never want to. I could care less if I did. This hobby has always been a direct reflection of my life as to, this is where I get my headaches out. This is where I get my relaxation. So I'm able to stop and say, hey, these Seminole County yellow rats, this is where it's at. You know what I'm saying? These guys are pretty cool, and I think more people need to work with these, or these Meomorums, or man, we are gonna Coleonyx it up here in a little bit. But there's so much, because of that attitude, because of that mentality. There's so much that we can promote in this hobby. With years and years and years of experience. And man, my building blocks come from people that did this for twice as long as I've done this. And then those people are building off of almost nothing, right? So there's a kind of a third generation coming out now that's kind of cranking the wheels a little bit more. And it's, man, I don't know. I'm excited. I get really excited thinking about it. It's
well, no, I just think I was saying, so this podcast obviously is now a part of the Herpetoculture Network. And when Justin and Phil were talking to me about that, I'm always in their live chats and their comments, like just running my mouth talking about stupid stuff. But it's like spheres of influence, right? And so like THN, and then there's like Morelia Python Radio, and then there's like these little chunks of people in different parts of the country, but also different parts of the hobby. And
sure.
it just kind of depends on where that influence comes from, right? Like you have a huge chunk of the hobby that saw doing it the industrial breeder way and went that route. And then for a bunch of them, it just that worked and it continues to perpetuate and so on and so forth. And then there is that segment where they're like, yeah, this just isn't my jam. Like, this isn't working for how I want to do this, or I'm not getting the results I thought I would get. And you kind of get that split of they either say, yeah, I'm not going to do this hobby, I'll do something else, or they get out of it or go to a different pet type or something. Yeah. Or you have those people that if you just dig like one level past the 80,000 person Facebook group and find some weird episode of NPR about Stimson's pythons or whatever goofy thing you wanted to look up that day.
Oh, like yeah.
That's how you find all these weird nerds that are super into what they're into. That it might not necessarily be what you're into, but yeah. To see, like, I think for like you're seeing these new people kind of find that split, like, yeah, I'm cool, I'm gonna do it this way, or I don't really know. And then they find a bunch of dudes, they're like, I only keep geckos that are smaller than a human pinky finger. And, yeah. Or what, like, you just crazy things. And those people didn't, even now, even being active members of Herpetoculture, didn't know that you could do that. Yeah. And then they see examples of these people doing crazy things with animals that they may not have even known of, or they knew in the periphery, like, colubrids, and there's some king snake morphs that are cool, but like, why are some of these guys such big nerds for Nerodia? Why do people give a crap about rat? Like, why is it so important to them? And then all you have to do is listen to some of these people talk, yourself included, why you get so ramped up about these things. And then it's like, oh, okay, that excites me to hear you talk about it, whether or not I'm into it or not, because that feeling is pervasive. People are just like that anyway. Yeah. But then that lets new people, I think, kind of sit there and go, man, I was walking around NARBC and I saw the one guy with whatever, basilisks, tokays, I don't care, whatever it was. I wasn't really going to get it because I was doing this with the hobby and I didn't really like that direction. And then they find out you could be a nerd and just go straight off the deep end with your weird stuff. And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're like,
okay, that's like the one dude that sells his Camaro and buys a Ford Edsel and is like, shut up, I like old stuff. You know, like it. All right,
oh man,
go for it. You know, it just.
I've had 9 Miatas. I literally know exactly what you're talking about.
But that's it. Society in general, at least in the U.S., is politically, sociologically, whatever, it is becoming much more accepting. And that's painful. And as you're seeing play out in our country, it's not going smoothly. But
no.
But it, in general, on the average, is becoming more accepting of whatever your unique thing is. And I think that is translating into interests and hobbies. And like people make fun, like, oh, hipsters and like craft beer nerds or whatever, you know, like those people have existed forever.
Yeah.
It's just that now they have their own bar and it turns out there's 100 of them in your town. You just didn't know. Yeah. It's because they all did it in their basement and now they have a bar they can go to. And you're like, why are all these people at the same bar? Like they all have the same interests and they dress alike or they have the same musical taste. And it's like, yeah, that's what a hobby is.
Yeah,
like
it turns out
there are a bunch of people with the same interest. That's why they're there. It's what that place is for.
And every week, every month, those places are getting busier and busier.
Oh yeah.
Because they're going into those breweries or those craft beer places. I'm using beer as an example, but those craft food places, those small, the places that make the burger with a million different toppings on it or whatever, because they're finding people that are passionate about what they're doing. And it turns out that the passion that goes into whatever craft, whether it's cigars or beers or food or handbags or wallets or, pick the thing, once they put their love into it, you get to reflect that, because we as a society and us as people constantly feed, and kind of reflecting what you just said, we are told what to like. We are told what's good. It's the same thing in the reptile hobby. We have been told for years that these are the best animals to keep. These are the best ones. There's 1,000 different morphs. You can pick whatever color you want. That doesn't mean they're bad. That doesn't mean there's not other options. Right. That there's absolutely nothing wrong with the leopard gecko. Leopard geckos truly are amazing. They have great little attitudes, and they do come in a million different colors. Corn snakes. I could literally sit here and we could talk for hours about corn snakes. I have tons of different morphs. I have tons of different localities. I love corn snakes. Ball pythons. Pick your poison when it comes to this hobby. The things that you were told to love, excuse me, there's no reason not to love them. That doesn't mean there's not other things that can scratch that same itch, or may scratch your itch a little better. And that's just like, I think we're at a day and age that there is enough information available and enough people out there willing to share their experiences that there's no longer a best reptile to keep. I almost don't even like that expression. The best reptile to keep
agree with that.
Is the one that you want the most, the one that you want to take care of the most, because everything you need to know about that animal is probably readily available. I'm sure if you want a sailfin dragon or something.
I would agree.
It might be a little tough, but yeah,
I honestly don't think so. I mean, I think the industry side of it has progressed to the point. Now, I'm not saying that everyone can afford it.
Yeah,
some of the equipment is very expensive.
Absolutely.
But that's one of my things. I like to build big enclosures for big stuff and house big crazy things. And a little bit of that has to be kind of do it yourself due to, size constraints for some things.
Sure.
But as far as their care and how to meet their parameters, the only part that's ever do it yourself for me really is the actual box they live in, because my boxes are just really big. That's the only difference. Cool. And for me to buy a big box that somebody else made is super expensive, and I don't want to do that, so I make my own. But everything else about the parameters is hobby industry stuff. I might just use it in more of them, or put them in a different place or something, but it's all the same stuff, same lights, same whatever. So I don't think that you're wrong there. I think if like chameleons or whatever, so really delicate, you don't start out with that, yada yada, there's this, that, and the other. Dude, there's an entire podcast called the Chameleon Academy podcast where you can, and a website, and a dude has an app where you can literally click on a species and go through it from egg to adult to making your own eggs or not, as you choose, of whatever, and just do what that guy says, and I will probably work because he's really, really good. But like
it's everything. It's all there. All of this work has been done. And then there's even one more step that we could even argue as like old school guys. I can now look up the humidity, the temperature, the light cycle.
Oh God, yeah.
The wind right now in Borneo, so that I know that my weird dorsalis offshoot, possibly different species of cat gecko, has the right humidity for Tuesday. I'm not talking about the month of May.
We're to the point Tuesday now where you can get information for plant nerds and put it into your lighting and make it matte. You can make seasons in your enclosure.
Yeah.
Because that's what plant dorks who have greenhouses are doing to grow orchids, or orchids you could smoke,
Nice.
But you can do that. Like, so
Yeah.
there used to be, when we started, there were species that you should not have started with because the equipment didn't exist for us to keep them
Sure.
alive.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how good you were. Like
Yeah.
there are species that I own right now that zoos didn't have when I was a kid because you couldn't keep them alive. That's just how it was. And it just isn't now. Like
No.
and that is also something that old school people have to kind of, I understand that it's begrudging because I feel that way too, and it's not fair that they don't have to work as hard. but you have to, dude, you got to understand, like, if some new person shows up on your Facebook group from TikTok or whatever, and you can't stand these kids coming in and wanting to buy a day gecko right out of the gate and set up their dart frogs and all the hard, difficult things. It's like, no, man, you can just go to Josh's Frogs and order the entire thing and build it in your living room. And they have a YouTube video how to do it. Like
and they literally will sell you plants that are from the same place, the exact same country that these. And
it's like, I know that's not fair, and it was terrible when we were kids.
Yeah,
but it's so awesome for them. Like, you kind of have to, like, I embrace that because it benefits me now, and I use it.
Oh yeah,
and it's wonderful. But like I think you get that little bit of kind of resentment, like, it's so easy for you. I used to walk uphill in the snow both ways to school, with my gecko. And I don't know. I understand the sentiment, but at the same time, like, that is allowing these people to come in and be like, no, you should bioactive everything. And you should have a tree in every enclosure and so on and so forth. And then when all of us are like, hey man, you don't have to do that. But for those people, they're like, well, but I can. I'm able. You weren't able when you started, so you learned to do it without. I'm starting now, and I can just start with a eucalyptus tree and build it. So why wouldn't and I don't want to downplay those people and tell them not to do that. Like, yeah, man, if you have a house that fits a eucalyptus tree, I personally feel like you should totally do that. And then
great. Yeah,
good for you. Like, it seems like people that have been in a lot longer are like, whoa there, pump the brakes, new guy. Why don't you get a corn snake and just chill out? And it's like, well, because they don't have to. I understand the sentiment of treating it as a hobby and learning to do things as you go, but there isn't a hard and set requirement now that you need to do it that way in order to gain that experience.
Not at all.
It's a big change for people.
It's really probably about 5 or 6 years ago. It's kind of funny. Kind of when the reptile hobby got put on the spotlight for certain people going very viral through YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, around that time, we can sit back and poo-poo on the ball python industry, but it built this hobby. Golf is not what it is now without Tiger Woods, right?
Oh, yeah,
Reptile hobby is not what it is without ball pythons. We can go as far as pinpointing specific names of people now that this hobby would not have touched and reached as many people if it was not for them. It doesn't matter.
For sure. Well, and just from a funding standpoint, why would you develop these lights and these LEDs and so on and so forth, and do the R&D and do that all takes money. A major corporation,
massive amount,
a major corporation is not going to invest in R&D to make fish lights good for lizard lights if all the fish guys are who have money. If lizard people aren't a big enough market, then fish guys get the lights. And they since like the 1970s. That's because they're a huge market. And it was like, I did saltwater for a long time. And when LEDs first became like cool for reptiles, my wife and I, we were laughing. And I was like, yeah, man, I've been using fish lights on reptiles for a long time. It just doesn't say reptile on it.
Or those really almost kind of like purple tinted grow lights that were from nurseries that fit into a little UVB black light, the thing you got at like the mall, the little black fixture, and you took the black light out and you put the grow light in there because that was like the cheapest way to do it. And it's like, but we know that there's some amount of UVB that's coming out of this. And my little, that's exactly what the Felsuma book said to do. It's like, put this over your.
Because when they wrote that book, they were literally stealing from fish nerds because they had to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so, you know, when I worked with Grandis, Felsuma Grandis, it was like, okay, well, these guys need a lot of light. And it's like, okay, well, how do you do that? And you open up the book and it says, open up the window. And you're like, oh,
good point.
Got it. Okay, that one, the one out there, not the one in here. And it's, you know, we we hit this big high point, and then we habitated it. I don't know if that's a word. We'll make up words today. We bring it down to almost nothing. But that lowest point that people talk about, where we cut everything out, where we made it super simple, sterile. We made it surgical. We said it's a piece of paper, a water bowl, 90 degrees in the back. Wait till they're 1,500 grams. Pair them up on Wednesday. Let me tell you what's going to happen on Thursday. That calculation, that little thing that a few people that really put a lot of work figured out and then told everybody, turn this little tiny candle into a forest fire, right?
Oh, yeah.
That little bit of work that said, oh, no, it's this easy. It's this easy. Took this and made it to where everything's easy. I would argue, you know, I know a few people that work with Stenosaurus. Excuse me, Stenosaurus, like especially like Pectinata and stuff like that. The life cycle of that animal with modern equipment, I don't see any difference between keeping that other than size and maybe handling to something like a Leachianus. Right, there's certain complications that come through with the Leachianus that not everybody sees. Everybody thinks it's just the cutest little snoot booping animal ever, and it necessarily isn't always. But there's size considerations, and there's obviously aggression considerations, and UV considerations, and a lot to take in with that animal. Okay, well now you have an animal that you can like bread and butter, and you know I guess maybe it's a little different here because we can keep them outside. I guess that's probably changes things. But you can keep some of the most egregious animals that we thought were like not even possible 20 years ago. In with modern technology, they're just as easy. Maybe not even modern technology. I don't even call it technology. Just modern conveniences more than anything. That we would have never have thought of having these animals. And now,
well, it's just basic knowledge.
Yeah,
like it's just to know that. You know what I mean? Like. So I keep referencing the Chameleon guy because I am a huge kick listening to his podcast. But
it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. He's great.
But like UV, right? We knew that they needed that. Chameleons are hard to care for, so on and so forth. And then somebody showed up with a UV meter and was like, yeah, man, if this thing says 3, it's good for veileds. And if it says 4, it's good for panthers. And 1s and 2s is the leaf chameleons and Jacksons. And the really big stuff needs all of that, but really big. Everybody was like, oh, where do I get a meter thing? And they're like, at the meter store.
Yeah.
Awesome. And now we can keep chameleons alive if we don't live in Florida.
Yeah.
But that was it.
That was it.
Everybody had a thing. You know, like you were saying, with ball pythons, there's a weight requirement, there's a heating requirement, and it works. And I also think that's why people are so wrapped around the axle for like Bolins and things like that, where it isn't working for some people or for anyone really, other than maybe one every now and again. And people, it's mind-boggling to people that it isn't just working. And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, that was true for everything. Like when we first started, ball pythons were crappy. They died. They didn't eat. They estivated during our winter, which was backward for them. There's still a whole section of the ball python industry. The stupid things only eat African soft fur rats. Like that. There's all kinds of weird stuff that it was really difficult for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And then because it used to be like people were trying to get ball pythons to go because they saw some weird genetic stuff and thought it could be cool, but it was so difficult. And the whole time there's another section of the hobby like, you guys are idiots. You can just breed corn snakes and king snakes over here in your closet.
Yeah.
Moron. You know? And now it's like, now you got people doing green tree pythons and people doing chameleons and people doing dart for like rooms of dart frogs, you know, whole fields of chameleon. Like people are so successful with these things that we thought were so difficult. And then now there's like 3 species that people aren't breeding.
Yeah.
And it's the Sphinx puzzle of reptiles. I don't even know what to do. And it's like, no, man, it's hard. It's not easy to do. And these species only really recently became available enough to us for us to start the puzzle. You know, these people that think they've succeeded for ball pythons, dude. Yeah, because Bob Clark got it when I was 5 years old, and has been doing it this whole time after he learned how to do it from Burmese pythons.
Yeah,
and that was probably 10 years before I was born.
Yeah,
and now everybody's like, "Oh, Burmese pythons, stupid derpy yellow snake." It's like, yeah, 40 years later when it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Like when I'm an old man sitting in the nursing home and every stupid kid on his rocket car has got a Boland's python, I'm going to say the same thing.
Yeah. You know, the Boland's and the Apodora, there's a few species that kind of click into this, like really, these have not been figured out yet. And it's crazy because in the snake world, specifically the python and boa world, there's only a handful that haven't been figured out. And I wait for those guys to figure those out and then come over and start doing work like Frank Payne's doing for lizards and species that nobody's working with, because there's an entire gamut of genus that nobody is working with, that nobody is.
And you also have to figure, like, I mean, people nowadays don't take into account, and by people nowadays, I mean newer people to the hobby. And it could be older people too. I guess it just kind of depends on your, like your worldview or your life experience, or however you want to characterize that. Like Boland's and Apodora and these things.
Yeah,
they're hard to get. Like it's not even that we aren't good at breeding them yet. Is we can't get them. And like Justin talks all the time about how he would love to have all of these different species from India, but you can't get them because they don't export. They don't do that. And so he has a list, like he's got a whole list of animals that he thinks are just the coolest thing ever that he can't have because that country doesn't export them.
Exactly.
So in 2 years, when something changes and COVID goes away and the world is all great, India opens up and we get his whole list of animals. And then they get here and they all die because they only eat Indian frogs or whatever. Like, you have no idea. Like, it's
no idea.
I don't know what. I was looking at an import list today because I like Koros rat snakes and I am mildly obsessed with chameleons, but I don't keep either of those. And so I always look at import lists and I want all the crazy things. And right by Koros rat snake, which is also a snake a bunch of people listening to this probably never heard of, were 3 other ones I also had never heard of. And so I had to Google and was like, oh my God, that's way cooler than the thing that I wanted.
Yeah.
And I just looked at its head and I was like, I bet you that stupid thing eats lizards. I'm not gonna get
there's a whole gamut of colubrids that we don't even know exist that start in a little bit North Texas and then run all the way down Mexico. And there's these lyre snakes and night snakes and all these really neat look like boiga, but they're from.
I have glossies in my shop.
glosses are pretty neat. And nobody knows about them. And it's like, wait, maybe let's look at these, but we can't even take something from Mexico, which is like 30 minutes that way, and bring it up here.
That's also a big deal. Yes,
it's like legitimately, and I'm not saying this to like not to sound crazy. It's easier to get drugs from Mexico than it is to get snakes from Mexico.
I firmly believe that.
It's completely true. Like
I agree.
It's actually a bigger fine to bring.
I have a unique day job, and yes, you are. No. I am the anti of those people. But yeah, no, that's 100% true. You absolutely could get narcotics across the U.S. border easier than you could beaded lizard or something of that nature.
Yeah. It's
for sure.
It's very interesting. But there's little pockets in this hobby. A lot of people use the saying that we're going to lose these things if we don't start working with them, and maybe that's true. But I don't think we realize what we've already lost, and I don't think we can even start counting the animals that we're just never going to figure out. We're never going to spend time with if people don't start. It's so weird. I start highlighting, right? Like start highlighting. You gotta find little things that maybe you want to work with, and everybody. I don't know. I would suggest anybody that's interested in this hobby, and there's so many of us. Find something that maybe not everybody's doing, and take a turn down. And if everybody started doing that, maybe the 50, 60, 100 people that are really serious about kind of like niche animals, we could start finding some amazing things. We can be the new guys that are finding the new answers,
Well, and the thing about that is yes, I 100% agree. And so I am very fortunate that in my small group of friends, and this probably sounds a little snobby, I guess, but we don't really have to care about what our animals cost within reason.
Yeah.
I don't buy like Aldabra tortoises or anything, but but I can kind of get what I want money wise. And so I choose to get weird things because I like them, and then I get some normal things because I do shows and stuff and so on and so forth. But my friend group is all relatively similar as far as means go. And so we pretty routinely are like, oh yeah, you want to do this, or you want to do one of those, or I want to do that. And we can swap stuff, or I got an extra whatever, just come get it, or that kind of thing. And it almost is a necessity for you to be that way, and for you to have a circle like that if you're gonna work with this weirder oddball stuff. So like I've heard Eric Burke talk about this multiple times with Boland's pythons, right? He has said it more than one, or he hasn't said it, he's asked the question of, is the price point stopping those snakes from being figured out? Because not enough people can work with them. Because there's a bunch of people that have done olives and carpets and now IJs, and and maybe if people that are good at IJs, if you're good at Papuan carpet pythons, maybe if you could get Papuan pythons, whatever it is about your basement that is good for them might be good for those, but you can't afford them. Or if you're good at white lips and you want the world's biggest, coolest white lip, and you get a Boland's python, maybe those two things would jive, but you can't afford that. You know what I mean? And it was kind of the same thought process for people that always talked about, like at the time, stuff in the Rhacodactylus complex, as it was called at the time. And it was like, well, if you could do cresteds, you could probably do Sarahs and Gargs and Leechies. Just nobody could afford the Leechies. No. And so, but we're seeing that now, because Leechies, they've maintained a really good price. They're still pretty expensive, but lots of people are breeding them. There are
Yeah.
nuances and there are differences we learned as we went. But
Yeah.
the difficulty wasn't nearly what we thought, given the price tag. And
No way.
so the
Yeah.
market is adjusting.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna do goofy stuff like that, you almost have to do it that way, because that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you said you produced those geckos and you didn't know what to do with the babies because you were a
No.
kid, and then you
No
had
shot.
somebody
Yeah.
who could take them off your hands.
Yeah.
If you and I decide to get a pleuris, that's something that I got. So we're gonna work with Madagascar weirdo iguanas together,
Yeah.
and we produce them. Who's gonna buy them?
That
Like,
is a
I think
major factor in this hobby.
I think they should be the next bearded dragon. And
Yeah.
you agree. Okay. Well, me and you in Illinois and Texas can only house like maybe 24 of these things.
Yeah.
And then they gotta go. you know? And but we're
crazy.
gonna have to put in whatever amount of money, a fair amount of money up front to purchase them and house them. And we're probably going to have to buy multiples because some are going to pass away, and imports, and there's going to be some time and effort and money that goes into it. And so you and I are now going to sell them, and we're going to split it as a partnership. All right, man. Well, we're charging like $500 a lizard then.
Yeah.
Because we have to.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then nobody's going to buy them because they don't know what it is. We say it's cool. It's a weirdo iguana from Madagascar, and it's black and white. I'm not giving you $500. Then no one will ever know. Eventually, you and I are going to run out of space in our garage for iguanas, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
It has to be one of those, like, you almost have to kind of give away your work in order for recognition.
You absolutely do.
Yeah.
It's so like, we're talking finances in reptiles. I've sold gargoyle geckos for $1,200, $1,500, right? Old school bacon line, deep red back stuff. I've got gargoyles that sell for a lot, and sometimes I'm like, I don't want to sell this animal for this much, but this is kind of like market price. It is what it is. When I bred line day geckos, and line day geckos, when I started working with them about maybe 8 years ago, 7 years ago, nobody had them. I got them from an importer. I paid $35 a piece. I got a trio. Lost the first female real quick right off the bat. So I had these line day geckos. And I kind of had to figure out how to get the eggs to work with them. And then I kind of started messing with some like different crested gecko diets and stuff. I found out they would eat those. And that was kind of neat. And I was like, okay, these are great. Then you had to kind of find the right way to, position bamboo. And I would use aquarium silicone and take little pieces of angle iron and put open pieces of bamboo. That's what they would lay their eggs in. Such a fun species to work with. So neat. And then they would have these tiny little babies, even smaller than the gold disc day geckos I hatched out 1,000,000 years ago. And then now I've got to get these babies going. Right now I've got to find the right, luckily we're in an age now, or at least even then, where I had fruit fly cultures. Right. So now I can give the babies fruit fly cultures. I kept them in jars with a little piece of like mosquito screen on top. And I just kind of put it inside it was an Exoterra 1824. And I actually put the jar in the parent's enclosure. Right. So
yeah,
it worked. Now they're getting UV. These tiny little lizards, I only had 2 of them in there, and they used every inch of that enclosure. And finally, I got a couple babies that survived, right? Like, I finally did it. I was like, oh man, I gotta have a couple babies, and you gotta get them a little bigger. Get them a little bigger, get it to where they're like eating crickets. Okay, you move them in their own enclosure. All right, now I ended up with 2 or 3. And then I was like, okay, all right, I'm gonna hold a female back. I'll put her in her own enclosure. I got these 2. I think it's a pair. I think this is a pair. All right, I'm gonna pull out my little computer, pull up the all right. I'm gonna post these for sale. All right, captive bred. Phelsuma, I think it's lineatus. I don't remember the exact species name. And I got these line day geckos, right? Okay, all right, let me see. My phone's gonna be blowing up here any minute, right? Nope. I think, and then I found one guy that was like, hey, I'm interested. How many do you have? And I was like, oh, I have a pair, and then a female that I was gonna hold back, and then some babies. And he was like, oh, I'll buy all of them for $100. And I was like, oh. Okay, so hey, there's something that reptile keepers can do these days, and this is a big thing that people got to understand. You don't have to breed everything you have. It's okay to just have one of something or two of something in two different enclosures and just breed them sometimes. And I think that's kind of a social media thing that's kind of plagued this hobby is everybody thinks they have to breed. You gotta breed those animals. If you don't breed those animals, you're not a real reptile keeper. You don't really care about that animal. Breeding is extremely important. And we need people out there that are passionate and that love breeding and propagating these animals. It doesn't mean you can't just keep them separate and let them live their lives. This will bleed into Coleonyx, my Coleonyx mitratus. I think that Coleonyx mitratus is one of the most missed animals in this hobby. Not only is it beautiful, it's interactive, it's mildly intelligent for a gecko, but they're just these so easy to keep under infinite parameters. These beautiful animals, and I bred them for years. And I gave away a lot of babies, and I sold a few babies. And you know, I actually started breeding them because I was going to use them as feeders for stubborn snakes, and even for like leeches and guards. Those the adult females, they like snacking on baby geckos, and it's part of their natural diet. And I don't think we're doing something wrong by doing that. But the babies, when you touch them, they squeak. And it's the cutest thing in the world. And it just broke my heart. I had a lot of, I couldn't do it. And so I bred them for a long time. But there was also many years where I kept the species, where I kept the females and males apart and didn't breed them. Maybe a couple females together, and you know, just maybe one male in his own thing. What's the harm in that? If you want to breed them, you can. But you need to know and plan on keeping every single animal you produce. Just plan on it. And then, you know, if you sell a few, good. If you're planning on immediately with zero experience getting into commercial breeding, go sell used cars. It's much easier. There's just so many things about the hobby that need to derive from your love of that animal and your love of what you want to do with that animal before you go anywhere else.
Yeah, I always think that's funny that so I keep well over 100 different species of animal.
Wow.
And I don't breed anything. I have bred some things in the past. I take that back. I have active breeding morning geckos, which is cheating because they just clone
You kind of can't not.
yeah, that's just how that happens. No, I don't really breed. I am cohabbing a pleuris iguanas with the hopes of them producing eggs.
Yeah.
They haven't for me yet, but and I've produced beards, but the beards came to me as a rescue, which my wife and I participate in, and people conveniently drop off pregnant things quite often, just like cats and dogs.
Yeah.
So I've played that game. What else? Let's see. I think that's about it. Oh, I have had eggs from hingeback tortoises, and that's it. And I don't care.
Exactly.
I don't care at all. And there's multiple reasons for that. There are things that I would like to breed, but I don't currently own them. So, but no, if I got them, I would get them because that is what I want to do with them.
Yeah.
The things that I have now are, I have a lot of animals that I do education with. So their purpose is, most of them are longer lived species. I use iguanids and tortoises and things, colubrids, things that have longer lifespans. And so year over year, I can teach age groups of kids using similar animals and stories and so on and so forth. There's a purpose behind it.
Yeah.
And the basically everything else in my collection is, I am actually a reptile nerd. Like I like reptiles. And so I have lizards and snakes and frogs and turtles and all kinds of things that don't get used in shows because I like them. That's
Yeah.
I want to own them, and I want to watch them do their lizard and snake things that they do, and because it's my hobby. That's what I like to do.
You genuinely enjoy having these things and tending to these animals,
Right.
regardless of who sees them.
Yeah, and most of them hate me, so I don't even touch it.
they all.
I am one of those dudes that like I think yellow anacondas are cool because I like highly aquatic snakes and I want to build a river in my basement. And that you can't touch it. It doesn't like me. It's got I also have 3 red-tailed boas that will just sit on me like a cat. Like I can have a big fat snake sit on me. I have a tegu that is fat and sits on me like a cat. It's wonderful. And then I also have a gold, which is basically a swift in a tegu's body, and they run like grease lightning and will bite you.
I have like 30 Pituophis that are just like, it's not
don't like humans, I do think though that mentality though, my mentality, I think might have driven more of the like bioactive deck out enclosure portion of it, because you're going to breed a bunch of stuff, right? And so you got to house multiple things, and you have to account for babies and grow outs. And if you have an actual breeding project, then you're talking about different generations and looking at lineages, and there's more than 2 animals are involved.
Yes.
Even if you only start with 2, eventually it's more than 2. And so now you have to account for a larger number of geckos or snakes or whatever the case may be. And so it only makes sense that a person in that situation would try to make things more efficient and streamline for themselves. I just think that's obvious. Right?
Yeah.
Like it feels stupid to tell you not to do that. Like you should set up all your enclosures the way that I set them up. And you could like you physically couldn't clean them all. You don't have enough time. It's just not possible, right? So I see how it went that direction. But then if you're like me, where I'm a little weird because I have a humongous collection, so I do just basically spend all my time in it. But if you're a normal person and you only have a couple, and you only have a handful or just one, whatever, you're an actual pet owner like a normal human being, not like us, and you look at the fact that you can do all of this stuff, like you kind of feel bad. Like, man, if I'm only going to keep one gecko, like I really probably should buy a eucalyptus tree. Like it, like it.
Why
you
not?
kind of feel jerk. Like, well, of course the guy who breeds geckos doesn't do that because he has to house 50 geckos. Like,
sure,
I've only got one. I should probably get it its own ficus bush. Like I just, you kind of feel shortchanging it.
Cindy the Snoot Booper is every bit as important to the future of this hobby as the person that produces 30,000 snakes a year.
Because she's buying them.
Yeah, because that's the girl that buys one and then tells her friend how much fun she has with one, and then she buys one. And it's I've sold some reptiles to some amazing people. I've sold geckos that have gone all over the world. A lot of stuff goes to Japan or maybe not Japan, but China and Korea, which is kind of amazing. It's neat to see that a lot of stuff, like, some of the certain niche animals I work with kind of just like disappear from America. But I vend shows. I vend a couple shows here, and only really local shows. But it's the love that I get to feel when it's that kid's first animal. I always produce a couple normal corn snakes a year, and I make it an absolute point. Those are not for sale. Somebody is going to take that home today, and it's not for sale. And I'm going to find out who that is. So every show, a couple corn snakes are going to leave my table for free. And hey, you know what? Any kids listening to this, if you're at Corpus Christi, Texas, Herp's Reptile Show, shout out to Sean and Lori. Love those people. They promote such a beautiful atmosphere for us to do this. And I get to take my heart for this, and I could put a couple snakes out, or maybe a couple geckos, and that kid is going to be there at my table and say, "Oh, mommy, this is all I ever wanted." And it's just like, all right, hey kiddo, listen up. You can have this one. go figure out what it needs or ask me what it needs. If you can make that happen, you come back, show me that you did that. Cheers. That feels better than the, quad stripe, 1,500 gecko flying off to Korea on Tuesday. It's, I don't know. It's such a weird, I have a lot of hobbies, and some of them are really silly hobbies. I've been into skateboarding, kickboxing, racing cars, Warhammer. Goodness gracious, painting these little models that cost an absolute ridiculous amount of money. Never been in a hobby that was so derived of you making money off of the hobby that you're doing, or so right. Everybody that gets into this hobby doesn't want one animal; they want two because they want to breed, and that's the. Not saying I don't want to breed every animal I have at least once, but going into it only wanting to do that.
It is kind of weird.
It's weird. It's
especially so for folks that don't know about the Warhammer thing that we've referenced. It's a tabletop game, and you use miniatures, and you can have different armies, and then you fight, and it's a tabletop game.
Yeah.
So, but the miniatures you use in the tabletop game, you don't buy. Well, you can buy.
Yeah, sure.
You'll buy like units to make up an army.
Yeah,
and then those units come in pieces and not painted.
Nope.
And the rules of the game actually say, and depending on if you get like as a hobby, if you go to play this game at like a tournament or something, the rules can be more stringent. But they actually say you have to assemble everything. You have to use a certain size of a base. And normally that comes with the box, but sometimes it's different. And you have to have usually at least 2 colors on it, which means if you just use the color it came in, you at least got to buy one kind of paint.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you get farther down the rabbit hole, it's more and so on and so forth. But like, there's a Games Workshop probably 45 minutes from me. It's actually right by Chicago Reptile House. So both of my nerderies are in one place.
Nice.
So you go in this store, and this is for folks that don't understand what we're saying. You go in this store, and the whole store, all of the walls is just boxes of models. And then one wall is all paint and paint supplies. And then there's usually display cases where other people have painted models, so you don't have to. You can just buy them and play if you want to, right? And then there's some tables and you can play on, and if they're cool, they'll have like little fake forests and stuff. Otherwise, it's just a flat table, and you imagine it and play it how you want to, or put out some Kleenex boxes and make it happen.
Yeah.
It is an astounding amount of money to buy those models, to buy the paint, and it's a major investment, like no joke, major investment. Even as an adult with like a real job, it's a real investment.
The giant from Games Workshop at the Games Workshop store is $190 each.
Right.
And you need at least 3 of them if you're playing that army, and then you need at least an addition 3 more of the small giants, which are further up on my table. Yeah. So it's shocking.
Right.
How much that game costs.
But if you go in the store to the club that's there playing, who are all also in the same hobby that you are a part of, that's expected.
Yeah.
Right. You probably are going to show up with like the beginner box that has the 2 basic armies in it or whatever.
Yeah.
And that everybody's like, people understand, like, you don't just,
they're so excited. Yeah.
You don't just show up and drop $5,000, but
no.
People get it. But there's definitely probably a handful of people in my store right now that have more than the car that I drive in their suitcases when they walk in, like for real crazy money. And they just show up every Wednesday and play. That's all they do. It's a once a week. And then like in the Facebook group that I'm in, like people post their updated painting. Hey, I got my base coat on. Here's some techniques for how I do grass or whatever. That's it. That's the amount of social involvement in that hobby compared to the monetary investment just to be a part of it.
just the entry level into it is it's so crazy to get into it, and then like you
It's
said,
probably several $100s for a
yeah,
set army just to play.
I would
And
say
then
that if you are going to play it, yeah, you're going to play it like an army based out of the rule book, 2,000 points, whatever it is.
yeah,
Yeah, you're five, six, $700 into it, and that's
right,
just to play.
right.
And
It's not even like to have cool stuff.
and it's now I'm not saying that these people aren't going to welcome you with open arms, but your involvement in that hobby, nobody will ever see a thing that you've done, right? Nobody's going to see the stuff you painted. Nobody's going to see any of that until you show up at the store. And that's just to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what makes our hobby so weird.
People get into this hobby and go to the reptile show and buy a crested gecko for $100, and they're like, oh well, is this male or female? And it's like, literally, I have told people, well, what does it matter? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, I mean, I want to breed it. And I'm like, well, these aren't, I'm not, okay, well, what are you going to breed it to? Well, we're looking for another male or female on your table. And I'm like, have you ever done this before? Oh no, this is going to be our first start into it. And it's like, what are you going to do with the babies? Are you going to bend the table next to me? Like, we're going to be homies? We're going to crack beers after this? We're going to, let's go, baby. Like, where does this go? Like, by creating life, right? Like, we all have this responsibilities, if we're parents or whatever you do, but it's by creating life, you are in charge of where that goes and what it does, right? Like, you just gonna let them die? You gotta keep them all? You're gonna get burnt out real quick and post them all on Craigslist? Are you gonna be the next world's biggest breeder, right? Like, you're gonna have thousands and thousands of crested geckos. That's where it's
or none of that, because if you ever even kept one,
yeah, exactly.
And now, are you going to accidentally buy 2 girls, then wait 5 years and ask on Facebook what happened?
Yeah,
like I just don't understand. I don't understand, like, because I also have a ton of different hobbies and all sorts of things, and like I have always talked about this in the framework of a hobby, in like I've used this example before. So, like, woodworking. So you start out whittling stuff with your grandpa when you're a kid, and then you do it your whole life, and then by the time you are a grandpa and you have a little wood shop in your garage or whatever, you're probably not an amateur. Your skill level is probably professional.
Yeah.
You might have never done it, or maybe you sold some stuff at a craft show or whatever, but your skill level is vastly increased over time. And then when I came into the hobby, it was kind of treated that way. And like we were talking before about folks who can just come in now and keep chameleons, and that's so crazy to people. Because when I came in, it was like, hey man, learn how to the beginner pets, corns and leopard geckos and things were so you could learn how to do this.
Yeah.
And then you could get weird stuff. Or if you knew how to keep small lizards, you could try to extrapolate that to keeping big lizards. Or
cut your teeth before you get too far. Yeah.
Right. And I think people are conflating the two, because you can just show up and buy a panther chameleon and all the stuff and keep it. I firmly believe that.
Succeed.
That if you do the research and buy the appropriate things, you can succeed. And that's true. And that's wonderful, I think. What I think people are getting mixed up on is that you could do that and then be Camouflage Creations next year.
Yeah.
And that, unless you have an absurd amount of money or something, like some weird outlier that would make that possible, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Like people are confusing the two because you just said that they could be successful. And what I think you meant by that is successfully keep an animal alive that we view as maybe delicate.
Yeah.
And that would be success in this instance. And for those people, it's like a foregone conclusion that they will, of course, keep the animals alive. Why wouldn't they buy 2 to produce babies? That's the logical next step. And it's like, no. The logical first step is you learning how to keep it alive. Like that, I know that it's real easy now, but you still can't skip the step. Like you gotta do it, you know? And it feels like people got sped up just a little too much. Like I'm really excited by the fact that people can keep crazy stuff now. I think it's only to our benefit. I think a lot of cool things are going to happen in the coming years with availability for oddball species.
Yeah.
I don't want people to take that to be, I can be the next Bob Clark.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I played football when I was growing up, and I dearly wanted to play professional football. I tore my ACL when I was in high school. I went to a Division III school, which is the smallest type of school in the United States for college that has sports, that isn't a junior college. We won like no games. I did not go to the combine, and I do not play in the NFL currently because I'm only 6'1". And that's how that works, you know. And there is a reason that those things are considered. Those people are considered so lucky and so fortunate, or so skilled, so good at what they do, because it's rare. It just is. Like Bob Clark may not have done what he did was groundbreaking at the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right now, there are other people doing a similar job. Yes.
Yeah.
He was the only dude that did it when I was born and would invest his entire life and savings into it.
He put every single ounce of himself into that. And that doesn't mean that somebody else that puts that much effort into it is going to have that much success, because there's some level of luck in there too.
Yes, absolutely. And timing.
It's timing is everything. And that you could almost go as far as saying there may never be another Bob Clark, right? There may never be people of this stature in this hobby. You know, I think there's a little bit of like, you know, we look back at like the Ron Treppers with the leopard geckos, and there's untapped potential for, and we're talking about this only on like a financial, where it's going to go. There's untapped potential for gains once the morphs in some of the easier to propagate species really start cracking out. Your crested geckos, your gargoyle geckos, stuff like that. This wave is going to hit one more time. Once you remember, so you're going to remember back in 2001, 99, 2001, when the Blizzard lizard was on the cover of Reptiles magazine.
Yeah.
And you saw that, and I didn't have the internet at the time. Like literally, we might have had dial-up. I don't even think that. We didn't have cable. My parents didn't have cable.
I know I saw it on an actual paper magazine.
Yeah,
I didn't see it on a computer.
That cover of Reptiles magazine, when you saw the Blizzard lizard and you were shook, right? What? That's no way. That feeling is probably never going to happen again, right? Because the instant...
I had that feeling at the last Tinley I went to. I walked by the dark night at a table, and I lost my freaking mind. And my wife was like, "Okay, that's pretty cool looking." And I was like, "Holy crap, you don't understand."
It's like, pretty cool.
I don't think that feeling will happen to
on that
million people.
Right. Yeah. Like everybody at the same time, they're like, that doesn't exist. That's not real. Right. Like I know what a Murphy patternless or whatever it was at the time, or, you know, there was like the Bell albino, right? The jungle, which we found out was polymorphic and not an actual recessive trait. Right. No, there's no way there's a solid white leopard gecko. And then they're like, oh, there's also banana lizard. they were called. And it's like, oh no, those are just like actually not that. Anyway, it was regardless, but just being absolutely just shooketh of seeing one of these things. Some of the ball python morphs, the crested gecko article in Reptiles magazine, where there was that like kind of blue one, but it turns out it was like kind of poopy lighting, and it was a blue gecko. But these moments of excitement are still going to exist, but they're never going to be on that grand scale. But, you know what? When I got, we got to talk about some Coleonyx. When I got into Coleonyx, I started doing a little bit of research here and there. There's not a lot of people that really work with them, and there is a lot of different species and subspecies. And that's kind of neat. But there's a leucistic variegatus. Not many people even know that it exists. It's a recessive trait. I believe there's only one person really working with them. But there's a solid white Coleonyx variegatus out there, and I wish that mattered in the hobby so that more people would get into that species. And just, there's, if we were talking about Coleonyx, you could do the entire gamut of keeping this animal from like Elegons not really needing that much heat all the way to like Brevis needing it to be like 91 degrees, 90 degrees. There's a lot, man, there's so much in this hobby. That's just so much potential for people to find little things that they're going to love, whether it's morphs, whether it's different species. It's, man, I don't know.
So
it's pretty amazing.
What does Coleonyx fulfill in that realm for you then? Why them? Is it just a branching from Eublepharid, or is it how did it happen?
So where it started was reading an article that was from an old Reptiles magazine that was pretty much like, here's Coleonyx mitratus. It's the banded gecko. Actually, it wasn't even Reptiles magazine. I don't remember. It might have been like an old Fauna or Vivarium magazine, an old magazine article. Reading about these animals that were like, okay, keep them at like 82 degrees, 84 degrees max, kind of humid, dirt, maybe, I guess, and they'll just breed themselves to death. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that seems like a really there's not a lot on paper about these animals. And then I got the eyelash geckos book, which is all about Eublepharid, and I was like, okay, Coleonyx mitratus, man, what a striking animal! Like this thing kind of looks like a ball python, but like 5 inches long.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, and it kind of meets the parameters when you're reading through that of like a Rhacodactylus. Maybe a little bit more on the warmer side, which I have found out and proven that not necessary, but I would suggest it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna breed these things, and I'm gonna feed the babies to my other lizards because that sounds great, right? Like I'm gonna fulfill a dietary need. And then I've also got these snake racks where these are small tubs. These are where my babies are at, and I have big tubs. But I was like, hey, I bet I could put these animals in that tub, and it's 82, 83 degrees on the backside, and it's 76 degrees on the front side. And if I fill it full of eco earth and maybe sprinkle some springtails in there, and you start building on this idea, and then okay, then you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 of these things coming from an importer, and you pay $25 a piece, and then you get them in your hands, and you're like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. Oh, they do a scorpion mimicry, right? They kind of do this thing where they bunch up on their haunches and they wave their tail, and you're like, oh, yep. Wow, that's kind of neat. And then you start keeping them, and they'll eat crickets, they'll eat mealworms, they'll eat dubia, they'll eat waxworms, they'll eat superworms if they're big enough and the superworms are small enough. And hey, massive shout out to Bayside Captive Bred Reptiles, my buddy Matt Trevino. He may actually be in the chat. He's my bug guy. I'm allergic to just about everything under the sun, and I'm pretty sure I'm allergic to mealworms, but he produces all bugs locally and does a big job of gut loading, healthy diets, and he actually delivers locally. So my man's able to, I don't actually house very many bugs in my house. He has a business and breeds a lot of really cool leopard geckos, fat-tailed geckos, and actually just got into the Coleonyx branch. But he's working with a whole bunch of different bugs, and what he supplies is feeders to local breeders and even ships some out. and what a service not only does he do to this hobby, but to himself, but also to the community. So that's a huge shout out to anybody that's working with bugs that can do that. That's not allergic to the world. I sneeze, hands break out and everything. I'm also allergic to mice. I'm also allergic to aspen. I'm probably allergic to happiness.
Wow.
So yeah, every single snake I have is kept usually on aspen. And I'm allergic to mice. I'm allergic to rats. I'm allergic to mealworms. I'm probably allergic to crickets and dubia. I just don't spend enough time around them. Anyway, so I got this lizard species back on Coleonyx. I've got these Coleonyx, and they're like just bulletproof, right? Like this animal will succeed. It is flourishing in my care with just such few parameters checked off the list, right? Like, so you make a list of things. It's like, okay, like some variability of temperature, some bugs, and all right, they're good. All right, okay, let's keep going. And then so that kind of morphs into let's see what we can do with this. So actually, about 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I in my office I built this big. It's like a 30-gallon display cage, right? Aquarium, live plants, false bottom, drainage layer, all that stuff. Water, not a water feature, but like water bowls in multiple different areas, heat, UV, UVB, and this thing like was flourishing. And I had Coleonyx mitratus in it. And I was like, man, I have this like whole little rainforest in my office at work, and I get to stare at it all day long. And I have Coleonyx mitratus of all the species in the world that I'm keeping. That's the one. They come out. You see them. They're interactive. They're not just in their little hidey hole all day. They feed almost communally. These eublephaриds poop in the same spot. When you have a community of these animals together, they all poop in the exact same spot in the cage. They actually have a little bathroom. It's so when you give them enough space, they literally poop all in the exact same spot. You can just clean that little spot, or if you have enough springtails going, it cleans itself. It's wild. And I was like, wow, what a species. And so I went from there, and then I got into brevis, and I bred brevis, and then I did variegatus, and I propagated those. I had a few problems with variegatus and viability of offspring, and I do believe that that's something that's been a derivative that I found in Coleonyx of if you over supplement them, their eggs are a little too. I use over supplement as maybe a simplified version of it, but if you supplement your animals too much, the eggs are over calcified, the babies just won't hatch out. So that's kind of just the thing that I noticed. So now with my Coleonyx, even though I'm actually not actively propagating them, I still only supplement once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks. I still haven't worked with any elegans.
So when that happened to you, did you end up opening the eggs later and you found formed babies? So
yeah.
Okay.
I had variegatus eggs incubated at like 81, 82 degrees at like 130 days. So I knew they weren't going to hatch, right? Like if that was a lychee egg, you'd be like, leave it, right? Like leave it. Because lychees might hatch at like 150 days. Like who knows how lychees work? I don't know. And I cut it open as a fully formed gecko that's like just obviously dead, right? Or they'll even like try to pip, and then the egg will deflate. Maybe it will pip even, and the egg will deflate, and they just won't make their way out of it. It's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah. Actually,
I don't think it's that weird of a thing because we're introducing supplements to these animals that they're not getting naturally, right? So if we're feeding a decent amount of dubia, so let's say we are not feeding these animals what they're eating in the wild, right? Like don't even like we're not even close to it, right? Like my tritus do not eat dubia roaches in the wild. Yeah. And then that dubia roach is also getting a very specific diet. Yes. That diet is a derivative of another commercial thing. So we're bioengineering feeder items to give to an animal that's being kept in a plastic box. There's no question that this is nothing like it is in the wild. Those two paths don't even cross. So what is the factor in there that may keep these things from hatching. Number one is self-flaw. We make mistakes constantly. We touched it too much. It's too wet. The temperature is off. There's a lot of little parameters we can click, clack, we can make decisions on. But I did find that once I stopped supplementing my feeders as much as I thought was necessary, always dust your feeders, right? Like we got that Reptiles magazine, dust the feeders with Reptile Calcium,
Yep.
or Vitamin 3000 or whatever you want to call it. You always dust your crickets, and it's like, well, do you? What are those crickets eating? What are those dubia eating? What are those mealworms eating? What are your superworms eating? What's the base of their diet?
See, I always thought that the assumption was no one in the hobby's ever going to gut load their feeders. So let's just sell them supplements instead of, because the what everybody always tells you is get your crickets from the store, put them in your little cricket keeper. That's why they made cricket keepers.
That's it.
Feed them some green with water content so they get some nutrients in them and they get hydrated. The next day, dump them in with your lizards and they'll eat them and you're good.
Yeah.
And then 0 people ever in the history of reptile keeping did that.
Yeah.
And all their animals kept getting MBD. All their animals kept dying. All these terrible things were happening. And they're like, yeah, man, I go to the store, I buy the crickets, I dump them in the thing to feed the lizard. I don't have time for the rest of that. And so like, okay, now if it's a mom and pop pet store, they'll dump the calcium in there for you.
Yeah.
If it's a big box store, I will sell you this little jar. On your way home, sprinkle this cheese on your cricket salad and dump it inside this lizard thing, and he's good to go. We're all happy. The lizard's not dead anymore. And it just feels to me like nowadays, different story.
Yeah.
There's a ton of engineering and thought process.
It's a lot
behind, the different supplement regimens we have, because now we do have a lot of herbivorous reptiles in the hobby. We do have animals that need a lot of calcium and all the weird D3 things with chameleons. And we have animals with very special dietary needs. And it's wonderful. It makes perfect sense. I think the origin story of it was lazy pet keepers.
Yeah.
And then when you got into something that is great for lazy people, now you're overdoing it. Like, no, go back to the 80s gecko keeping for this guy.
It's you're so you're hitting that hammer, the nail on the head. The convenience of a product that you could just add to what the thing was you had and just be done with it was perfect. But then when you have that one person that goes the step beyond, and not even a day or two, I'm talking months of gut loading on animals, creating an entire generation of bugs. Like I said, my man's Matt Trevino over at Bayside Captive Bred Reptiles. Hit him up. He's got everything you ever need.
But people, is his last name Trevino?
Oh yeah, Trevino. Yeah, it's Matt Trevino. Okay.
So he was in the chat, or may still be in the chat, and he's also a Warhammer nerd and was rocking the Blood Angels. So
no, he's my homie.
Nerdery on multiple sets. So good to go.
Absolutely. But you have people like this that put all of the same effort that they put into their animals into their feeders, and it's like now you're getting these high quality feeders that it's like maybe we don't supplement as much, which is such a weird dichotomy from what we're talking about earlier. Whereas there's all these products to make things easier, and when little Susie gets her Panther Chameleon, I want to make sure that she's using Rapashi brand supplement on her crickets that she's getting from Petco. Please do that and make sure that you keep up with it. But now let's take a million steps back and start. Let's break this down to the DNA level of it. Where are you getting your mice feeders from? Where are you getting your bug feeders from?
See, yes, I agree. People should look at that and should definitely take those things into consideration. But my thing with, so you talked about dubia roaches and then Coleonyx. To me, it's really simple because I am a nerd and I read a lot of books. Coleonyx geckos don't live in places that have a whole lot of cockroaches.
Nope. Sure
And
don't.
the lizards that live in places that have a whole lot of cockroaches are either fast or fat.
Yep.
Because cockroaches are really, really high in basically everything. Fat, water, protein. Because they eat basically everything.
Yeah.
They populate themselves in the thousands, and then stuff shows up and eats them by the hundreds.
Yeah.
And then it either burns all that off like crack running because it's a swift of some kind up a tree in South America, or it's a tegu and it puts it in its fat jowls, and then it goes and hibernates because it lives up the mountainside.
Yeah.
Now you have a little desert gecko that is probably just eating a bunch of spiders whenever they hatch out one time a year.
Sparingly,
and the rest of the time is basically a camel with scales.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah. Like what are you talking about? Like,
yeah,
that's why leopard geckos are fat. They don't eat cockroaches. They eat spiders in Iran and Afghanistan on a mountainside where it's not a fun place to live.
And when you give them a little bucket of mealworms, they sit there and they eat and they eat and they eat and they eat and then they eat some more, and then they start licking the calcium that you just put in a little cup right in front of them. They're just good to go.
Calcium is the ranch dressing of the leopard gecko world.
Oh, and I was gonna make it. I'm not gonna. Y'all, we're just gonna keep this PG. I was gonna make a joke. It's gonna be anyways. There's dietary. Man, this could go on for a long time. The dietary expectations of a keeper of anybody in a small animal hobby is so weird. We're going to go back to caging. I think caging is a scratch compared to dietary specifications. We can put a cage together that's going to maximize. We're never going to get it right? Like, everybody's got to understand you're never going to get it right. There's very few instances where we'll get caging right and maybe we'll check some boxes. We're never going to get diet right. You know what I mean? I say never, but that's not completely true. But to match an animal's diet in the wild is almost impossible. So what are we doing? Are we domesticating these animals?
You're not sweeping a butterfly net through Suriname. You're just not.
Exactly. You're the ball pythons, whatever they eat in the wild, which is that literally African soft fur rats? I don't know. But it's, like in their little termite mound doing their thing. It's like, well, that's why they don't want to eat the rat. It's because that's not what they eat. I work with gray-banded king snakes. I've worked with them for the first snake I ever had was a gray-banded king snake. Dude. Baby gray-banded king snakes don't eat mice, right? They don't want mice. They don't eat mice. In the wild, they almost completely scleroporous spiny lizards, right? It's almost all they eat. And so it's like we have to trick them to eat the thing that is nutritionally valuable to them so that they'll live for 25, 30 years. It's nutrition in reptiles is crazy. So my view on that is to offer as many different things as possible and make sure the things that I'm offering to all of my animals are coming from a good source. So like I work with a lot of bull snakes, pine snakes, and I know more of a lizard podcast, but I offer a lot of chicks and quail, farm bred. I don't know if that's the right word. Eggs. They'll eat eggs that will get a farm fresh here. Stuff like that, because here in the wild, the bull snakes will come to your chicken coop and eat all your baby chicks. These are things that just happen. With lizards, even with my gargoyles, I'm not like the biggest fan of crickets. I'm not gonna lie, it's not my favorite thing on the planet. But I tongue feed, and it's probably would annoy most people that work with a lot of animals. But I tongue feed my gargoyles. And I know mealworms, superworms, dubias, waxworms, black fly larvas. There's a whole gamut of things you can do. You can also add supplements to the different pre-made diets, I guess is the best way to call them. I also go through a bunch of different brands. I want to like they're not going to be eating the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Like the lychee does not, stretch his legs and come out of his little tree hollow and just like, my Pangea for the day, and then just go hide back in his little log. It's not the case. That doesn't mean that we can't keep them on a steady diet of that. And that doesn't mean they're not going to live for 40 years off of that. That's already been proven, right? Somebody already sat down and was like, look, if I give my Leachianus Pangea, it'll live for 40 years. Here's the proof. Maybe it wasn't Pangea 40 years ago, but like they've literally done that.
Right.
And, okay. That doesn't mean you can't take a little bit of a step further and try a few different things and complicate it for yourself as well as for your animals. Dang. Doesn't mean you have to, I guess. That doesn't mean we have to make that specific necessity on these things, but I think it's valuable to the animals to do so.
I've actually never understood. So I have a wide spectrum of different reptiles. But I like the stuff that I have that eats weird or specific things, and I really enjoy my herbivores, like my iguanas and my uromastyx and stuff like that. It's because obviously it's also an availability type of thing as well. But like I can just go to the store and pick a different green or vegetable and give it to them, and I do, and that's expected. Like if you keep iguanids and you keep uromastyx, it's expected that you feed a variety of salad, or you feed seasonally, or whatever you choose to do, and supplement as needed, and so on and so forth. And then you get to like insectivore lizards, and you just don't. It's like, well, but you like all my monitors, they eat basically any meat that will fit in their face. They don't care. And so I feed them pretty much whatever's on sale because they eat a lot. But like, why is that not okay? Or why is that not expected for an insectivore? Like if I go talk to a bunch of monitor nerds, depending on the size of their animals, and even nowadays, not really, because people have realized that you can just shred up the chicken or whatever to feed to smaller monitors. It's just expected. Like, oh yeah, I rotate through birds and fish and meat and eggs and what have you. And then if I go talk to all my iguana nerd friends, you can literally Google a list of like, here's all the green crap that iguanas can eat. Pick one and give it to them. And so you do. And then you get to insectivores and they're like, oh man, it's so much easier just to buy 2,000 mealworms. And it's like, but I agree that it is easier. I understand that it's easier, but first of all, dozens of insects are now available to you as a consumer. And now that we actually do understand about gut loading, and we've understood it for a long time. Now our hobby is just less lazy, so we'll actually do it.
It's more convenient, right? Like gut loading feeders is more convenient now than ever.
Yeah. And I just don't understand, like, insectivore lizards is just this weird part where like, nah, man, if it eats Pangea, you just put it in the bowl. And if it doesn't, eat superworms. And if it doesn't, I don't want to keep it. Like, what? What are you talking about? Like,
there's weird. Like it's so weird. There's like a part of me that's like, that's fine. If that's the instrument you want to buy and the song you want to play, that's fine. If your parameter has to be, it has to eat Pangea, and it has to be able to kept at room temperature, and it has to be able to live on pool noodles and paper towels, great, right?
Yeah, there is something for you. Yes.
There is a box you can check for that, and I hope that you'll diversify outside of that, maybe try a few different diets, maybe try a few different substrates, maybe, take those pool noodles out and get a fake stick. I don't know. You don't have to do that, but I hope so. And I hope those animals, if you are maintaining them with the mentality of only the best care, they're going to do great. I know they're going to do great. I've seen all the Korean websites. I know how they keep animals. I know those animals are going to be completely healthy.
For sure.
When you want to take that little step and just say, okay, let's try some of these other diets. Hey, how about I mix some diets together or, make my own diet? That's a possibility. You can do that. Maybe I'm going to offer some feeders to these guys to see how they do. I offer to my leeches actually hoppers or like the small furry mice. It's so funny. I have like a billion snakes. I don't even know what they're called. I spend like $500 a month on rats or mice.
Right.
Like, I don't know. The ones that are
frustrating.
Furry. Yeah. It's I just check the boxes and I buy them all. I don't know.
Right. I know what the grocery list says. Just
redo the order. Just whatever I ordered last time. Just get another set. But you can give these animals these feeder items and like see how they do with it. See how their weight gain is. Even though I talked about earlier, I'll kind of contradict myself a little bit. I talked about not spending so much time weighing every animal and not creating that spreadsheet and not maybe if you want to be serious about this hobby and try to breed some animals, do that for a year. There's a lot to see. What kind of a weight gain do I get? Maybe if I keep this baby and this baby separately, and this baby only eats Pangea, and this baby, and we use Pangea as an example. Hey, Pangea, hit me up. If you want to do sponsorships, it's your boy. Gecko Daddy _6969 at yahoo.com. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so there's a lot of different viable options out there. So let's move around and let's see what works best for our collections.
Well, and my thing is too that it's like you were talking about the pool noodles and all that, and it works. And you can't say that it doesn't. It does. Nope. But there's also a level of recognition that you wanted whatever the species is. It doesn't matter if it's a crested gecko, a ball python, or goldfish, or what. It doesn't matter. You wanted these parameters, and then you found it, and you're living in your spot. Cool. There also needs to be recognition that should you decide to go to another species, you can't always take your box with you.
No,
I think it's a little difficult to. I mean, it will be conveyed very rapidly because they'll likely lose the animal, but that sucks. Is that look? I know you did this super chill thing and it was very simple and it worked and you didn't have to think about it and you got a bunch of cute things in the fish part with the Eiffel Tower and it's great. This thing you're looking at now, it can't do that.
No.
Now you need to take that step up. If you don't want to, that's cool.
Absolutely.
But that works over here. If you want to come over and check out day geckos or I saw an electric blue and oh my god, I did too and they're amazing. That beautiful box doesn't necessarily work here. Now you're gonna have to change your skill set a little bit.
But I tell you what, if you hit that box for those electric blue day geckos, you start doing something like I'm gonna say his name again, Frank Payne. You had him on the show. What amazing guy. Once you start hitting that box where your level, when you've got that knob turned up to 11, guess what? The species you can keep if you have that knob turned up to 11 are it's whatever. More. Yeah, I mean, he's got a pantheon of different species he's working with. Like, I keep these exactly the same as I keep these. Is exactly the same I keep these. Human environment, 80. I'm just making up numbers here, but 84 degrees. UVB. We're trying to hit a X level, and these guys have these leaves that are. It's wow.
People like that found their vibe. Like, I dig this kind of animal, and I got set up for it. And now I know how to build this enclosure. I know I like this brand of lights. I know, and blah, 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 blah. And so now a person like him, and he does have other things that are a little bit outside of that realm. But if he chooses to confine himself to his parameters, because now he's successful, right?
Yeah.
This worked.
Yeah.
This recipe worked. So it turns out I like to make tarts. I don't like to make cakes. It's
Yeah.
like, cool, man. If you're good at tarts and you just stay there, you can make all the flavors you want. You just happen to suck at cakes, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for somebody like him, his room, the way his house is, the part of the country he lives in, all of that stuff, he figured it out, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm really good at this. It works really well for me. And instead of reinventing the wheel each time, he just started flipping open the books and was like, yeah, man, these parameters look pretty close and this looks pretty cool. Yeah. I'm going to try that. You know,
this clicks here and this clicks here and this clicks here.
And awesome. That is how those people have continued success, is that the recognition of I'm good at this. Like he I don't know, he might be terrible at Euromastics or whatever. Like it's the antithesis of what he currently keeps. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like he's like, yeah, I hate sand, you know, or whatever. Like it just it wouldn't. You know,
Skywalker.
he recognized where he was excelling, and but that didn't. What I want newer people to realize is, using him as an example, it didn't pigeonhole him onto, oh, now he's stuck. Only keep it. Like blue geckos are cool, but if you only ever kept them, people feel like, oh, I would get bored, or like it's not as cool. Like, no, man, this dude keeps a ton of different stuff. Yeah. It turns out lots of reptiles live in the jungle, and they live in the jungle around where he lives. Like, you know, or it's honestly dorks like me that like desert stuff, that it's not a lot of stuff lives in the desert because it tries to kill you. So there's only a few things that actively live where their house tries to kill them. You know,
it's like my collection. I have a lot of stuff. So I'm in South Texas on the ocean. I am as humid is, right? Like it does not get below 50% humidity in my house. So my reptile room could probably stay at 60-70% humidity sometimes. Depends. You know, I'm also this is my old school. This is my old man grumpiness coming out. I spray all my animals by hand. You get sprayed by hand. A machine doesn't spray you. I spray you. That's an old man thing. We have timers for what? I don't need a timer. The Lord gave me the sun to wake up with, and so my humidity is kind of high. And I've tried a few different desert species that I didn't really succeed with. You know, I bred bearded dragons back in the day, but is that really a desert species, or is that just like a whole continent of Australia? Is Australia even real? We don't know. The Earth is flat, but. I did really bad with knobtails. Did not do exceptionally well in my collection. They've actually my knobtails moved on to Brian Lovins with Lovins Reptiles, and he's had endless success with them. My Variegatus and my Brevis actually did really well, but they're kind of in that hammerhead bulletproof. Like we can deal with the higher humidity. You know, we live on the coast of California. We live on the Rio Grande. We live in these actually humid areas. We live in the Big Bend forest, right? Like this is a very forested area that's kind of in the middle of the desert, which is pretty amazing. In Texas, the greatest state of all states. And they can micro habitat into a lot of different places, so you can deal with higher humidity. But I have had some issues with a couple different species of, like I have some Baja rat snakes, which is a kind of a weird snake. Not many people work with it, but I also have a great collection of Baja rat snakes in my freezer because I needed to figure out how to keep that specific animal, and there wasn't a bunch of information wrote down on them. Ouch. But that's also part of this hobby. If you're going to get into this hobby, and you're going to work with things that not everybody works with, and that there's not this beautiful book you can grab it at the bookstore and learn about. And also, I probably say one thing more than anything else. A thing that we need to remember is that some of these species are going to react more actively and more readily to good and bad faster. So depending on their metabolism, maybe a Baja rat snake, where we're sitting here looking at one of these Rosalie, and they crash immediately because the humidity is too high. You don't have enough ventilation. There's too much water. To the point where I pretty much have to keep them in a separate room. But I'm not talking about in 2, 3, 4 months of degradation on these animals. I'm talking 2, 3 weeks. That's a thing we have to remember. Some of these animals come in imported. Some of these animals come in, obviously those aren't imported. They're from Mexico. I would never have that in my collection. But the idea that these animals were never meant to be kept in an environment like this, and you put them in there just for a small amount of time, they're done. They're just absolutely done.
It's too unique where they're from.
Yeah, and it's especially when you get into stuff with microhabitats. There's some very, very unique areas that are extremely hot, extremely humid. There's weird areas that are extremely hot, not humid, and there's so many infinite parameters. We can go back to the Bolians pythons. Maybe the reason that doesn't work out is because barometric pressure or altitude, or there's something in there that doesn't click. We got to figure it out. And like you said, that's buying people out of the chance to work with them, right? Like if something, I don't even know what they cost. Let's say 10 grand, 5 grand, whatever. That's, the guy that wants to put his heart into that animal probably can, right? Like, you want a pair or a trio of those pythons. It's like that, or like what, like a used M3. I don't know which one sounds cooler to you, right? It's weird, and we gotta. The same time we're doing that, we need to spend a little bit more time on the $25 geckos, right? Like the Coleonyx metratus, the gold dust day geckos, the species that are absolutely rewarding and remind people you can have that same experience. You can have that same enjoyment out of this little guy that, maybe you get it from an import. And that's one thing that sucks. Some of the coolest stuff nobody brings, right? Like, nobody is going to sell you a metratus, captive bred. Like they just don't exist. I can't sit here and say that I had trouble selling mine, but they're $25 geckos, right? Like it's actually really hard to sell a $25 gecko, and it's you just want to put them in people's hands. I want you to experience this the way I experienced it, and it's the best. I promise you, it's the best. You're only going to have success with it. It's going to be bulletproof. My Coleonyx that's in my office. The female did pass away. I got my pair, my first pair that went into my office, wild caught, again, 6-7 years ago. My male's still alive. The female passed away early last year, but the Texas freeze hit. We all heard about that just after Valentine's Day. It wiped us out. So I'm here in South Texas, beautiful sunny Corpus Christi, average temperature about 110, and it's frozen. This gecko's in my office, which, my insulation is essentially paper, and I can't drive to work because the entire world is literally shut down. Like all of our roads shut down. I don't know what ice is. What's ice? I don't know. You tell me. And I'm like, okay, well, the gecko's going to be dead, right? Like it's not going to survive. I don't have heat on it. We don't have power. We didn't have power for like a week.
Right.
There's no way this animal is going to be okay. And so I finally make it into work on like Thursday after having no power since Sunday. And even on Thursday when I got there, there's no power. And I get there and it's not the first. I will tell you, I work in a big shop, lots of people. It wasn't the first thing I thought of, but once I got into my office, I got everything unloaded. We're trying to get the power up because we use big 480 power grids.
Sure.
The first thing I check, I'm like, oh man, not the first thing. I just literally said it wasn't the first thing, but I check my gecko. Little homie dug his way all the way down to the false bottom, and he's just sitting there, like, hey, it's kind of cold. Let's do something about that, right? And it's like, whoa, this thing comes from like what? Yucatan Peninsula, Honduras kind of area. We're not trying to get too north. That'll start dipping into Elegans, but like this thing is like central equatorial. Like this thing is on the equator and it does not experience these temperatures, but it like kind of figured it out. And stuff like that, animals like that, just blow my mind that people don't want more of in their life. Yet you'll hear infinite things about ball pythons just being the best animal that you could possibly have. And like I said, we're not going to sit here and say that one of these animals is better than the other because you need to know how to take care of them. But
no, man, I will. It's fine.
I will literally. There's so much. I'm a big proponent of not breeding an animal. Justin Smith, Palmetto Coast Exotics, Herpetoculture Network, like everything. he said it a million times. I've reiterated what he says. Don't breed something. Don't think about even propagating something until you've worked with them for a year. He always says a year. I've had a very strict quarantine setup. Most things don't come into my collection for 3-4 months, anyways, right? Like you're not coming in the reptile room until like this date is kind of passed, anyways. But I won't try to pair up or breed any geckos for about 6-8 months. And like Phylloris that I'm working with now, some of the cat geckos I'm working with now, man, it's like so neat to have these animals. And I'm even at the point where like I don't even know if I want to try to pair these things up, right? I'm kind of at that point in my keeping where it's like I think you don't need to breed everything, which is kind of, unless you have like somebody that's like, hey, you think you could make more of those? I don't know, like that's gonna be a fun thing. I breed my guards, and I like that because there's also a financial gain from that. The lychees, some of the snakes I work with are there to. That, I mean, there is a convenience to that. A lot of my collection has been built from profit of propagating animals, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of neat. We're in a pretty special place in this hobby where we can do stuff like that. But yeah, getting that information out to others, letting them know the animals that are there. I don't know.
True. I just when you talk about stuff like I think cat geckos are amazing. And
They're pretty cool, man. They're pretty neat.
Yeah, I get a lot of import lists and stuff, and I see a lot of different things, and I see those in like the Curtidactylus and a couple of different geckos that I think are super cool, and it's kind of the same way. Like I just want to keep them to keep them, and then if you had people that showed interest, then it's like, oh yeah, maybe we could set something up or try to breed them or what have you, and that would be awesome. But then I don't know, man. It gets really difficult to where, so like my collection, it's large, it's quite variable, there's a bunch of different stuff. But I don't produce anything because an industry exists where I can get a replacement animal when something passes away.
Sure.
But when you get into some of these species, then you can't.
No.
And it's like it's almost to the point now for some things, not for all things, but like weird stuff like cat geckos. It's like if you want to continue to have them available, you almost have to be willing to contribute to the breeding portion of that, just because there might only be 6 or 8 of you guys in the country. And then here in 6, 8, 10 years, when yours passes away, you won't have a replacement animal.
Yeah.
It's a little weirder for somebody on my end. Like I have a lot of very long lived things.
Yeah. Especially with the turtles and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. But I have that, like my son is 11 and he is very into turtles. And when it first became a big deal for him, that I was like, oh, that'll be cool. Like as he gets a collection and has these different things. And I still am old school in that I think of it in that term, as I think of it in the terms of a collection.
Yeah.
Because he's really into the Moremus genus. And he doesn't really want to produce turtles. He wants to have the Moremus genus and see how all these turtles do what they do in their own little ways, because they're from different places, but they're the same genus.
Hey, could you excuse me for 1 second? I am so sorry.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. You got 1 second?
Yeah, man.
I'll be right back. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. All right, who's still hanging out in the chat? Where are we at here? Dustin, yes, it took us a while, but we got to Coleonyx. Dom had to run, but she would love to hear Kris chat about his daughter. I agree, because my kids are also in the hobbies, so when he gets back, I will ask him about that. All of Kris's gargs have pointy elbows. I feel like there's a backstory there. Probably. in the 80s, lots of people thought most monitors were impossible to breed. Yes, because so many of them came in imported and were so beat up, people did not have a lot of success. If anybody was on the kingsnake.com forums and things like that back in the day, a guy named Frank Reitz and a handful of other people changed a lot of that and were really successful in breeding just about every species of monitor you could think of. And nowadays, even as we discover new ones on all the different islands in Indo and start to do different things with the Indicus complex and stuff like that, people are still having pretty regular success with just about all of the species I can think of in the Varanid complex, to include the new ones.
So sorry about
that. While you were gone, Nate Jones said to tell you all of your Gargs have pointy elbows.
You know what?
I felt like there was a backstory to that.
Okay, this dude, I don't even know him, right? Never even heard of him in my life. But I seen him post a picture of some
That's fantastic
on the interwebs, and my goodness, I have never seen something with elbows more pointy than that, right? And I said that, and I said you should not buy geckos from him. Nate Jones, a total homie of mine. We always joke around on people's pictures, and it's great because people take it extremely seriously. It's like, ooh, man, I don't know about that one's tail. And people are like, what's wrong with the tail? Why is Nate Jones the worst breeder ever? And he doesn't make gargoyles that are good. The tail's broken on it. And it's probably part of the seriousness that people develop
for sure.
Their online personas, right? Like, you're real tough. But Nate Jones is with Nasty Racks. He does a lot of Racodactylus work, Leechies, Guards, Cresties.
Killer.
Jehua, he's good buddy, good friend. But yeah, he produces some beautiful animals. Yeah, so yeah, that's where
I have one buddy. I have one friend that I am able to do that with. That he became like moderately famous on social media, and then he was on TV a couple of times. So
Jay-Z?
No, I'm not that cool.
Oh
no.
Okay.
So, but he was in the military. I was in the military. We did the same stuff, whatever. And so now he, to a lot of people, is a big deal. And like I know him. Just he was a guy I was in the military with. He's just a guy. And but he also did he did cool stuff. But so like he'll post things and I'll do that. Like I'll be like, yeah, that workout was stupid. Man. Like, nice shirt, idiot, or whatever. And dude, people lose their minds.
Yeah,
like people go crazy on social media to the point that like my friend, who is now this semi-famous person, has to come back and be like, hey, I know him. Like, don't find this guy's house. Like, what are you doing? People go nuts. It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah,
you have to use social media for at least some of that, or you'll lose your mind.
I wish everybody took social media at a grain of salt. Social media is like the most beautiful thing we have, right? Like, I can contact you and we can sit here and talk about like literally the oddest, silliest geckos ever and be excited about it. And this will go out to other people's earlobes and like get into their brains. And it's like the coolest thing ever. But at the same time, if we make a false assumption about something, we make a false claim about something, I'm not even talking about joking, people will take it to heart. And now we have people that is that you don't need to even go as far as Wikipedia, which is, I mean, just as good as the Bible, right? Like you got that. I heard this on Facebook. This is real, right? And it's like, man, you will have the same people criticizing social media for news, for politics, for any of these things, discrediting social media for these things, and those same people will defend something wholeheartedly, whether it's something to do with reptiles or on a dietary needs or just many.
That does make you a little more careful, though.
Yeah,
I think, because I don't. I enjoy doing this, but I didn't really think that the podcast was going to be all that popular, and it kind of is, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But like I've had people, even in the short period of time that I have done this, say, "Oh, I heard you say this," or
Yeah.
you know, and it so far has been okay. Like I didn't say anything stupid or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, but like it made me stop and think like, oh wait, like people are listening to what I say. Like I'm pretty confident in what I was saying, or some parameter for an iguana or whatever. But
Sure.
like
Yeah.
it was one of those things like, oh, I'm really glad I didn't screw that up.
Yeah. You are now an influencer. People like Justin Smith, these guys, Joe Phelan, the NPR guys. You guys are influencers. The words you say now carry weight, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. If we sit here and just preach on how Coleonyx mitratus is the best species of gecko that anybody ever had, which it is. I mean, straight up, like anybody wants. They're great. But we sit here and just preach on it for episode after episode after episode. This is the Coleonyx quarter, right, of Facebook. At some point, it would have catched on, right? Like these things.
Dude, you hear NPR talk about that, and they're kind of making fun of each other when they say it.
Yeah.
But they're right.
Yeah.
Where like Owen will complain like, oh man, white-lipped pythons are so expensive. And then Eric will laugh at him and go, well, stop talking about them then.
Yeah.
Like you told everybody how cool they were. So they all went and bought them. And now when you look for them, they cost a lot of money. Like, and you can hear that they're just kind of, busting chops, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
Like I know they're making a joke, but as a listener, I sit there and I'm like, yeah, that's totally what happened. You guys totally just talked to 2,000 people every week for 5 years. And that's what happened. Like you changed their perception of those animals. And then now you're making a joke about it because like they're normal dudes. Like they don't, they're just regular guys. And so they don't take themselves seriously enough to think that they altered that marketplace. And it's like, no, man, you totally did.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that's what happened in that particular instance. But
and you're straight up driving to work and you're sitting there, you're just doing your thing, you're like, oh, you're right. I do need a white-lipped python. That sounds
great. Right. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's so our influencers have changed, and where we find our influences have changed. Maybe it was Reptiles Magazine, and who are they going to cover? The people that are making money, and that's where you get your ball python stuff. And that's where that hobby kind of exploded from.
For sure.
And now we follow influencers on Instagram or Facebook, and man, the sources of our media come from so many different interesting directions. And I'm assuming you're kind of in that age group, same as me, where it's like we're old school. Right, like you probably as a kid like me probably didn't even have internet in your house. Like I didn't have internet. Like we got our social media was like legit either the news, the newspaper, or like the magazine that came out once a month. That was social media, and it's such a different world. But we're not in like that old school old man grumpy category, but we're also not necessarily in that like new school category where all we know is like, you need an update because today's Tuesday and it's time to give Slinky her, rat or whatever. And which there's nothing wrong with either one, but if you have to mesh them two together, where do we get the most?
It is weird being somewhere in the middle between like the Trumbauers of the world meeting in a Waffle House to trade king snakes.
Yeah.
And then like beardy moms on TikTok. And there's this group of people like us that are in the middle where like I wasn't old enough for that guy to talk to me. So I never like met him until it was more like a fangirl thing when I saw that dude at NARBC or something. Yeah. And then, but I'm too old to like put a beardy with wings in a TikTok. Like I make them with my kids because I think it's funny. Yeah. But like they'll have grown up with like when I was a kid, I made TikToks with my dad because it was funny. And like that is how they're starting, and so it's you're in this like weird in between space. I don't know. It's
like
cool because we get both, but it is there's a transition, I guess.
My we all have somebody that kind of, maybe it wasn't an individual person for all of us, but for me, I had one person that really kind of was my blinding light on what I wanted to do and who I wanted to work with and the animals I wanted to work with. That's cool. Again, I talk about all the time Carl Vargas, who's a very, very, very close friend of mine locally, but he's as old school gets. I mean, you're talking about one of the guys that was like first breeding leechies and gargs and stuff like that in the States, and 30 years ago, right? Like when I meet him, he's working with frill dragons and bearded dragons and leopard geckos and leechies, and it's like, whoa, as a 14, 15-year-old kid, and being lucky enough to grow up with that. But his outlook on like what we're doing compared to my outlook on what we're doing compared to like what my kids' outlook may be on what we're doing, or even just people's outlook who are new generational. It's so interesting to see. But it's we all love the same thing, right?
Right.
It's
I do think that's funny. That all three of those groups are still nerds that are into bearded dragons or whatever. And it's like, no, you don't nerd the right way.
Yeah. It's so
what?
And it's funny.
What are you
None of these people are in this hobby to like be cool or to be different. Like nobody's in this hobby to like be different, right? Like, maybe you did the edgy thing where like you got into whatever your cool hair and like you listened to Yellow Card and you did your thing and like we're doing the dancing and the heavy metal music, like whatever. Like that was something you got into to be part of that community. Nobody got
like an oddly specific life reference.
Skateboarding and hip hop. That's it. That was me growing up. Beastie Boys. You know about Beastie Boys? I was the Beastie Boys. That was. Oh man, that probably dates me, right? Like Beastie Boys. Just that was
a little bit. But I knew the reference, so I'm in the same date. So
yeah, I was about to say I think we're probably pretty close in age. Nobody got into reptiles because they were just like, if I like snakes, people will think I'm cool. Because it's like the exact opposite. It's like, man, I really like snakes.
Yeah.
Nope, this. And then it's...
Well, but that is a difference, though, for this generation, is that they do have better access to social groups like that, though.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing.
That's such a
But I think that helped us.
Right? Yeah.
Like, because we were there for kind of the advent of that.
Yeah.
Like, we went from forums to Facebook, and then it just exploded to the other forms of social media. So I think we kind of benefited from that, but it's definitely different for, like when you talk to the old school dudes and, the Bill Loves and people of that generation, like starter of the hobby people.
Yeah.
They probably had a handful of friends that were into it, but most of them were talking to like zoo curators or like professionals in the animal world, because that was kind of their only resource other than, books and literature, like an actual person to hang out and talk to. They had to actually correspond with some professional in the field.
Yeah.
They didn't really have the social groups, I guess, but that also kind of made it a little more difficult when our set came along.
Yeah.
Because that crew was that crew. And if you weren't in the crew,
you were not part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It made a big difference.
We're the in-betweeners. We got this, right? Like we're the ones that were trained by them, but then leaded the nude school into the social media.
That's it. Is that in Fight Club? The middle children of history?
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
We're just the middle children of history. It's such a weird, awkward, beautiful, lovable place to be. Like I get to enjoy this hobby as for a lot more years than I have already with literally all of the information in the world at my fingertips, while still having experiences that people have never experienced.
I didn't think about it in that way. That's a fairly profound way to think about that. Like I have decades to go, but even if I just started right now, which I haven't, I'm way into it. With that kind of resource access,
you have everything.
That's pretty amazing.
We have the maturity level to have the appreciation for the work that we've put into it, and to talk on the level of the guys that have put their time into it. You know, we get to talk to the Trumbauers and the Vargases, and then these people that are the John Laster, who's a big name in this hobby, who's a beautiful, great friend of mine, and has become close, not even just to me, but to my family. We're on a level where we get to meet these guys in a professional sense, and also on a personal level, because we can talk. You know, we have kids. We know what it's like to pay mortgage, right? Like, how bad does that payment suck, man? Like, oh man, that new F-150 does have a step that comes out, and I can get up in there without tearing that ACL for the 14th time. But we're that in between nation where we get to also take our love, our interest, our positivity, and we can spread it like wildfire. Look at the people that are doing podcasts. I'm gonna guess they're all, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm gonna guess they're all between pretty close to 30 and 45. I don't know, maybe I don't know the oldest guy. You know, I'm not saying who the oldest guy is, but I don't know where.
Eric Burke.
I'm gonna guess it's Eric Burke, but I'm gonna guess he's in that early 40s range. And I'm in my late 30s. You know,
it's probably all very similar, I would say.
Yeah, and then we have like Justin and Jake and Phil and Joe Phelan, these guys that are kind of like late 20s, early 30s, kind of like sprouting in there. We're kind of all in that same generation, but now we have the new generation that's coming in and doing this stuff. Dominique DeFalco, people like that are coming in their early 20s, 20, 21 years old. And they really know social media. They know how to promote things. They know how to make t-shirts online. Like, what kind of sorcery is that, right? Like, there's a logo that gets put on a t-shirt that might be 100% cotton and feels so great on my back. But yeah, like there's these, we're the translators of the future, right? Like, we get to take all of this cool stuff that was there and learn from these guys. And because they're not going to go to those youngins, right? Like, they're
right.
We're going to be that mainstream.
I will say though that a lot of folks in the set before us are probably in the last 5 years. A lot of those folks are writing books, which I was super happy to see. I think, and I don't know any of those folks personally, so I'm not trying to speak for them, but like, I think maybe that is more of a getting later in life, wanting to leave a legacy kind of thing.
Exactly.
Because like, those dudes don't hang out in Facebook groups. They, you know, like most of them are quite a bit later in life. You know, there's only so many NARBCs and Daytonas they're going to go to. Like, it's just not.
And they lived for that stuff. That's right. That's all they got. They didn't have Facebook groups where you got to show your picture of the gray band of king snake.
That's what I'm saying. So like, I think that that is also to our benefit, is that a big worry, I think, was that we were going to lose those things, you know, and then as we went to this transition of it's all social media, like going to the NARBC and all this other stuff, like, and then those people were just kind of fading out in the background, and that huge repository of knowledge and experience was fading away.
Exactly.
I think it's massively to our benefit that quite a few of them have written books or made memoirs or what have you. And so it's not going to, it'll be preserved, I guess, which is it's kind of a morbid way to think about it, because most of those guys are still alive and not that old, but
it's the best way to think about it though. Let's say the person that writes the book about liar snakes and how glossy snakes are just the best, right? This is the complete guide to glossy snakes. He passes away. you're right. It is immortalized. It is. That information will never go away, right? It may be modified, it may be proven completely wrong, but that mark will always pass on to the future.
Well, but even to do the work for modification or to disprove, you have to have that information as a starting point.
Yeah.
Even if you wake up and say that I'm going to write my PhD disproving that, if you didn't have that to aim at, you wouldn't be aiming. So
Yeah,
I mean, you do have to have that starting piece of information, I guess.
You can't be second to the throne without there being a king, right?
Yeah,
somebody had to get there first, and that's we're very lucky to be the generational keepers that we are, and I think we will fade into the old guy status hopefully soon. I'm ready. You know what I mean? My heart and soul is ready to just be old guy keeper and just be mad at everyone.
I don't know, man. I like making stupid TikToks with my kids.
I'm
riding that for a little while.
My daughter's only 4, so I don't know the TikToks, and people send me TikToks. I'm like, dude, what is this? A video in which is less than a minute long? I don't understand. So I'm working on it. But no, it's man, what a great place to be in, right? Where remember, okay, I'm sure we're probably running late. Do you remember 5 years ago, maybe 5 years ago? So let's say the podcast, we've got Gecko Nation Radio, we've got the Reptile Room podcast. Well, podcasts are not necessarily easy to get. The only way to get a podcast, you got to download it down to your library. That's the only way you're going to be able to listen to it. True. So if you're going to listen to Herp Nation Radio or NPR, which shout out to the NPR guys. Like, I've been listening for, I think it's 8 or 9 years, however long they've been doing this. But you had to download it to some kind of a library. And I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I didn't have like a smartphone or anything. I got a Motorola Razr, right? Maybe years ago. And it's like, so you're downloading these things from the internet and listening to them on like your computer, which is, a big giant thing. And now I've heard people complain about like this flood of just podcasts. There's so many reptile podcasts coming out. There's so many Warhammer podcasts coming out. There's so many cigar podcasts coming out. No, lucky. There's so many books on the shelf to read about what you want to read. If you don't like podcasts, do it. If you don't like the guest, don't listen to it. If you don't, you don't owe anybody anything that they're putting out for free, right? Like, this is free content.
Right.
Nobody owes you for that, right? Like, you did not do this so that little Jimmy could pay you money, right? You did this because you had passion for it. Find the people that have the passion that correlates with your passion or your love, or, we could use many different words to say it, but where your source of information, whether it's not even information, just your source of cerebral value comes from, you get to decide, as a person, and we get to do that together.
Well, and I also think it's funny that to think that our hobby is unique in the YouTube channel, podcasts, realm is crazy. It's a format and a platform for any type of information sharing. Yeah. And it has exploded. But that's why if it wouldn't have exploded if there weren't consumers of the content. Yeah. In whatever platform, whatever it is, music, cars, it doesn't have to be this. All of those things have blown up. Yeah. Because of that, it's culturally, it's society, how we consume content now. Yeah. I've seen quite a few of those things, like, oh great, and their podcast I can't keep up with, and it's like, well, you don't have to, like,
don't keep, that's fine.
Yeah, but like that's my thing. Like, if I would assume that if you were a sole snake nerd and you don't care about things with legs, and you probably don't listen. Like that's okay. I don't, that's cool. I don't know. I always thought it
Yeah,
was funny. Like I need to listen to all of them. Like, no, man, you don't have to. Like
totally don't.
if it's not your jam, like that's fine.
Yeah.
I also think that the free content thing, the guys at THN, you hear them talk about that, like with the magazine, where they're like, well, I mean, if you don't like the magazine, it's free. You don't have to look at it, dude. Yeah. No money whatsoever. I actually, when I joined the Herpetoculture Network, just talked to my wife today about increasing the amount of money I spend for my streaming thing so I could send it, because it limits you for how many pages you can use or whatever. And obviously THN has other pages that I don't. And so I was like, oh, well, if I want to do it on their pages, I need a different level in my podcast thing.
Yeah.
And so I told my wife, I was like, yeah, that costs more money. And it's like, yeah, thanks for the opportunity, man, to spend more of my own money. That's super cool. Like, I just think that's funny. Like, no one is doing what Joe Rogan did with Reptile Podcast. We're not.
No.
Like, Spotify will never call us. They won't.
I mean,
I wish they would, because I would buy an Aldabra tomorrow, but they won't.
Dude, yeah. Words, they're tough. Woo. So I think there's
for everybody listening, that sounded like bad Wi-Fi, but it wasn't. It was just him talking.
I stutter and miss my brain a little bit. There's something missing from this hobby, and I don't know if this is a positive or negative, and I'll kind of like blurt it out there now. I think, I come from a world of like skateboarding, and I raced for almost 20 years. I had sponsors. I did time attack and actually into pro-am drifting, which was really neat. So I did all these like crazy silly things. I think we can almost relate that to like kind of reptile keeping. Reptiles keeping is kind of like this crazy silly thing. It is absolutely 110% a luxury. It's a luxury item.
Absolutely.
Right? We do not need this to survive. It's just like racing, just like skateboarding, just like so many of these silly little, maybe those are more physical, but who cares about that? One thing, I was sponsored when I was a skateboarder. I had a couple sponsors that said, hey, if you wear my shoes when you skateboard, or you ride my skateboard, we'll give you free skateboards. So why aren't there more of these, I hate to say celebrity reptile keepers, but larger name reptile keepers? We could sit here and say, who's your favorite Aldabra tortoise breeder? And I'm obviously probably like two, but let's say like your favorite gecko breeder, your favorite, who works with the best red stripe guards, who works with the best Coleonyx mitratus. Hit me up, yo, it's your boy Kris. Let me know what's up, Avalanche. That's a better culture. So, why aren't these supply companies reaching out to individual? Now, they have reached out to like podcasts, magazine, and that's great.
Sure.
But why don't you reach out to individual breeders and say, hey, I'll throw you a couple cages and pitch my product. Hey, Pangea, hit me up, my thing. You want me, hey, post pictures just with Pangea. Like, it's kind of weird that we haven't really clicked into that. Every other hobby does that, right? Everyone else gets there.
I think that the industry side of this is a little bit backward from what people think.
Yeah.
In that the people that make the most money at Daytona or NARBC or probably any reptile show you've ever been to are people that sell dry goods and food.
Yep.
And like I live south of Tinley, so I go to pretty much all the NARBCs that I'm able to. And when you go to the auction, that's a big thing on Saturday night. It's an auction raised for charity. Crazy money gets spent there. It's awesome. It's all for a good cause, and it's a great time. The biggest spenders are also the biggest money earners at the show, and it's folks that do feeders and dry goods.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just like there really isn't an incentive for a cage manufacturer. And I shouldn't say this because I would love for them to sponsor me and send me free stuff, but
hit up your boy Bill, Cold Blood.
Yeah.
Lizard Brain Radio. We got this.
There really isn't, to my point of view, there really isn't that much incentive for them to sponsor me or you or whoever and so they're going to give me 2 cages. This is our new rounded front door model. Check it out. Bill's got 2 and he's going to post it on his Instagram and keep some geckos in it and whatever. And so I do that and I show it off and okay. But the way, I don't know, man, like the way the industry side of things are here, like you could just make a Facebook or YouTube ad and
just do it anyways, right?
And do it on your own. Like, and it would still show up in my feed. And if you put a cool animal in it that I may or may not own, and you could Photoshop that. Like, you don't even have to actually own the cool animal, I just like it. I agree that it's weird.
It's weird that it's not there, right?
As you get to the more like professional, semi-professional part of any hobby, there's usually the companies that make money off that hobby want to incentivize the semi-professional people, and of course the professional people, but it's the semi-professional person that you always keep the amateur coming in. There's only going to be a few professionals that you're going to be really excited about. There's 1 or 2 skateboarders that that you're a fan of.
Yeah.
And then there's like a couple of guys who are just above you that like they get free boards, but they don't have Tony Hawk money. They just get free boards. Yeah. And you as an amateur, I'd like some free boards. I'll probably never have Tony Hawk money, but I could catch a free board. Like,
you're making a video, and I'm going to do like a kickflip over this thing, and you're going to give me a board to do that. Yeah. I'm going to jump. Let's do this. Exactly.
But the reptile pet industry, it feels like they don't really need us to do that. Like,
right. Every other hobby centric industry,
are
paid based off of endorsements. Look at golf, racing, skateboarding.
If you produce 10,000 leopard geckos and make good money doing it, I don't really care what kind of cage you use, because 9,999 people need a cage for a leopard gecko.
Yeah.
And if I have good advertising, it doesn't really matter what you do, because the likelihood, especially for the larger folks, somebody like me would be a little different, but like it would feel and probably be false.
Yeah.
If one of those people was like, I totally use all glass enclosures, and you're like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Like, that's not true.
Buy the new leopard gecko habitat from XYZ. It's the only thing I use to breed my 30,000 leopard gecko babies a year.
Right. When you're like, no. I mean, if Sterilite was advertising for you, or Rubbermaid, then but like I don't know. It would be really difficult it would just be so niche and so focused. Like, the one guy who bred Boland's pythons that used Bob's cages, that didn't have anything to do with it. And like the people in the hobby who would spend a fair amount of money are probably people that have been in for a decent amount of time, have a level of knowledge to know that.
Yeah. They literally know that home growing everything you kind of do other than the animals is probably, when it comes down to the commercial level of things, the most economic way to do it.
Well, and it's our hobby or industry, both really, does still kind of come down to those spheres of influence. And so you probably buy your enclosures or racks or whatever regionally. They suck to ship, and you go to shows in your region, so you probably buy them from your region's guy.
Man. Shout out to my boy Chris Nolan at Sea Serpent, seaserpents.com. It's all the caging I use, my entire room. If you want to hit me up for a sponsorship, hit me up. South Texas Snake Daddy _6969. Whatever. Hit me up. Chris Nettles. Sorry, that's his last name.
But that's what I'm saying. Like frozen feeders are probably the only thing that you drop ship to your home. The rest, like you get bugs from your bug guy. I get bugs from a lady who's by me. I get, enclosures from a couple of places that are by me. Or I go to NARBC with the intent to spend money once a year to do this big purchase. We have a weird setup.
It's a niche hobby within a niche idea, right? Like you have your small pet keepers, and that's like okay, so we just say we're taking human beings and saying like this many people want pets, and then like now we're going to break that down to like small pet keepers, which is even smaller than people with pets, and then now we're going to say you're a reptile keeper, and now you're a reptile keeper that needs this, and there's it's crazy how finite of a detail we'll get down to. Yet a lot of the equipment we use is from ground to top, kind of a neat, similar. Oh man, such a weird, interesting, great hobby. It's good.
But I mean that does kind of explain, like, why you don't see some of the things that you see in other hobby sport type things. It lends itself to some really cool and unique things. And then some of the things that you think are commonplace, it just doesn't really jive. I don't know. It's weird.
It's kind of...
All right, man. We are cruising toward 3 hours. So
3 more to go.
Right?
Took my Tylenol. We're good.
I will absolutely just pass out on YouTube Live. So
I got to get up in a couple hours for work.
Yeah, me too. I don't know why I picked to do this on Sunday nights, knowing I work on Mondays, but I just did, and so now I'm stuck in it. But
you know what's funny is Sunday nights is the best night for podcasts. I don't know what it is, because that is like the wind down night. Everybody's just chilling.
Well, that was my thought. Was like I don't ever really have anything going on Sunday nights. My kids don't really have school stuff on that day or what have you, and then I do it, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's perfect. I don't have anything going on. And then I think for a second, I'm like, well, the reason I don't have anything going on is because I need to go to bed so I can go to work, because that's the end of my weekend. Oh, crap.
Hey, shout out to JT, who's in the chat, Silent Hill Reptiles. Dude literally produces some of the most amazing, just absolutely drop-dead gorgeous corn snakes. Oh,
sure.
Dude, JT's got it going on.
He has some killer social media feeds. You can see a lot of very cool snakes.
Yeah.
All right, man. So speaking of social media feeds, where can folks find you? Should they want to do that, or to sponsor you for awesome
things? Hit me up for anything. I like these plastic bottles for whoever makes these. You know what I'm saying? Let's go, baby.
You know that's a food supply store that makes like MSG.
Yeah, I was like, those things are like $1. Hey, but if Games Workshop, I know we talked about Warhammer a lot. I know y'all are listening in right now. Hit up your boy.
And if you like old school AOS, there is an army of lizard men. I look at it every time I'm at the store. Just saying.
What? Okay, so Bill is about to get into Age of Sigmar and play some lizard men. We like that.
You, my stuff right now, I have Kill Team, and I do have Age of Sigmar. Yes, I do.
Probably have. I'm not going to move my camera, but I probably have somewhere between 700 and 800 painted models, all throughout. Like, dude,
I'm not that far down the rabbit hole.
Do you see up at the top? Yeah, no, I've been doing this for years, and then all on top of all of my. I don't know.
No.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's more expensive than the animals.
There's Warhammer stuff all the way up here, and then all the way across. Then I have another closet, entire walk-in closet full of bags full of painted models. Man, Raven Guard, I go all the way back to 30K. I have a full 30K Forge World Army. I have, I think, 7 or 8 painted knights, Imperial Knights, the Knight Lancer.
Holy cow!
10 drop pods.
So for those of you who are wondering, what he just described was a big pile of Leachianus geckos worth of money.
I literally have a big pile of Leachianus geckos right here too.
And that's how I bought all those models.
The models came way before that. Warhammer's been a part of my life for. Well, I guess geckos have been a part of my life too. different strains of hobbies. Man, I've been playing Warhammer at least 12 years because the Vampire new army just came out, and I still have old school painted vampires. I don't know, man, dude, we could talk about this forever. Anyway, hit me up. So if somebody wants to talk to me, hit me up at Kris Painschab on Facebook, or I'm pointing at my things on my screen. The Badlands Herpetoculture, probably on Instagram. If you put up my Facebook got busted for trying to sell animals. How dare me? So I don't ever post on my Facebook Badlands Herpetoculture, but if somebody did actually message me on that, I'd probably get it. Yeah. Somebody wants my cell phone number, hit me up, just give it to you, whatever. I'm old, so like that's probably the easiest way to get hold of me.
And I will link all of those things in the show notes for folks. And then when I make the posting about the episode, I will also link it there. So folks will be able to find it. Yeah, man, this is awesome.
This is awesome.
And I feel like we didn't even discuss half the stuff we could have.
If you ever want to do a Coleonyx episode, I could do a little bit more preparation to like be like, this is what we're going to talk about, and we can just talk about all the different species and how great they are. Yeah, because they're all awesome. God, all of these are awesome. You know what's awesome? This little guy right here. Look, I'm going to show you something. This is awesome. This is what people need more of.
Oh no!
It needs. Look, we need more.
Yeah.
That's a McMullen County female wild cod, beautiful girl, eats great. Trying to work with more of these guys. The world just needs more of these things.
Yeah, they do.
And she's been just like right here in my face, and I was like, I gotta see her. Okay. Anyways, silly stuff.
That's awesome.
Have a good one, man.
All right, I appreciate you coming on.
Anytime.
Thanks.
Have a good night. Bye.
All right. I think that was probably the longest episode we have done, and it was awesome. I know there were folks talking about things in the chat. I made notes, and I will definitely have Kris on again, and we will talk more, especially talking about bringing kids into the hobby. Thank you for bringing that up. As most of you may know or may not, my kids are heavily involved in the hobby with my wife and I, so I definitely want to talk more with Kris about that. It's always a little weird because I have heard him talk before, and I've talked to him in Messenger and things like that. So it feels like you're rehashing the conversation, but then obviously a lot of you folks want to hear him talk about those things. So I want to make sure you guys can hear that. And it's a really cool topic. It's really exciting to be able to bring your kids into it. So it's a lot of fun. And if you were in the live chat, you might have saw the Herpetoculture Network pop in and was talking to us a little bit. This was the first episode of Lizard Brain Radio, with the podcast being an official part of the Herpetoculture Network, which was really cool. One of the shows that they do is Snakes and Stogies, and I have been in their live chat the whole time since they were doing it, and talking to Phil and Justin, messaging, going back and forth, and I was sitting in their live chat talking to other folks listening to the episode, and Justin brought it up and asked if I would like to join my podcast into the network. So we did, and it gives the Herpetoculture Network a little bit more diversity to talk about lizards and some of the weird stuff that I talk about. As Justin and Phil's interests lie more in snakes specifically, and obviously really heavily into venomous. And so the hope is that this show and the folks that I interview can kind of diversify that a little bit. And we all similar personalities, collections, style of keeping, talk, get along really well. So it kind of made sense that I would provide them a lizard outlet for folks to listen to. So it's been really cool. I'm really happy about it, and I think it's going to be awesome going forward. And she is now, I think, asleep, but I did talk to my wife earlier about maybe going to Daytona, because that seems to be a Herpetoculture Network thing. So maybe we will try and make that happen. Who knows? All right. I will see you guys again in 2 weeks. Later.